I apologize about that. My laptop decided it was going to do an update right in the middle of signing on. So I'm assuming we're standing for the pledge. Call to order. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the January 11th meeting of the Rutland Board of School Commissioners to order. Please stand and recite the pledge.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Let the secretary note that all members are present, including our 2 school members. Okay, next we'll be up for the approval of the agenda.
We have a hand up here in the board.
Okay, we have a hand up. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the hand, sir?
I would like to actually add something to the agenda.
Okay. What do you want to add?
So I actually wrote it out here because I know that we're into the semantics these days. So I would like to add new business, an action item, to change the Ravens moniker to the Raiders moniker.
Okay. To change from Ravens to Raiders. Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Stephanie seconded. Any debate?
We have a hand up.
Okay. Kathy?
Hi. So the change that I wanted to make related to that as well, but that it wasn't a typo, because in fact you can't have that on the agenda as a new business without a motion to rescind on the table. So it's an improper use either way.
Is there any other
motion to rescind?
And that has to be warned a meeting ahead, or it's a 2/3.
Actually, it doesn't, because the agenda hasn't been approved.
Here I'm showing Charlene Seward with her hand up trying to...
Okay, Charlene Seward, please.
I'd like to just add to that we've been the Ravens since February of last year. So this is new business, as this is changing the Ravens to the Raiders, and it takes a majority vote to put something on the agenda at the beginning before it's been adopted.
Right, yeah, Robert's Rules of Order says in order to get anything on the agenda, it just takes a majority vote at the beginning. Once the agenda is approved, it takes 2/3. Okay,
That's my understanding.
Actually,
I have Kathy Solstice's hand up, and Kevin Kefeber's hand is up as well, I see, and Allison's hand is up here in the boardroom too.
All right, Allison, we can start with Allison.
Kathy was first, and then Kevin, and then me.
all right, so according to Robert's rules, there has to be a motion to rescind before it can be new business, because there's an active policy, and that has to be warned ahead of time. And I can read you the passage in Robert's rules if you like. And if it's not warned, then it does need to be 2/3.
Okay. Hold on. I'm listening to everybody. I guess I'll come up. Who's next? Ian? Allison? Doesn't matter which.
I think Kevin was.
I'd just like to point out that in our board operating protocols, number 3, it says that we agree to ask the board chair or the superintendent to place an item on the agenda instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at the meeting unless the issue is emergent and requires immediate attention. So this is a violation of our own board protocols. It also is a very divisive issue, and I would love to see us push pass on this. This is not a good way to go.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Allison, you have your hand up. I'm doing my best looking at everybody, and I think Ann did too.
So the requirements for whether it is on an agenda or not is not at the agenda approval, it is at the warning, and the reason for that is so that everyone is aware of board business and can participate based on the business that is labeled for the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Ann? you had?
I did not have my hand up. Okay, you have Charlene again then.
Okay, and then Charlene?
So, Robert's Rules of Order is a guideline to conduct business. I believe this is new business, because we're changing the Ravens to the Raiders. Any board member can bring an item to the agenda, to be added to the agenda, with a majority vote. This is the democratic process. I'm not sure why you're against that. If the majority of the board would like to put something on the agenda for a majority vote, I'm not sure why we're stopping that process. It's not up to you, and it's not up to me, but it's up to the board as a whole. And the majority of the board would like to discuss this item. I know we're talking about semantics, but I feel this is new business. And if you want to refute that with a parliamentarian that they're trying to secure, that you have every opportunity to do that. But today, I feel like this is new business, and we should move forward the meeting.
Okay, and then Ann, I believe.
I don't think Ann
doesn't have her hand up.
Oh,
I didn't put my hand up, Harry.
Some person behind her.
It's the person in the
This
audience.
is board discussion though.
Well, I understand that, but it was warned at the last meeting.
So the point of order then would be, you can add it to the agenda, absolutely, but you need a 2/3 in order to take it up.
You can add an item to the agenda. I'm sorry.
So, you can add an item to the agenda, so that is a simple majority. But for the agenda, for that item to be actionable, it needs to win by a 2/3 vote.
okay,
So-
thank you, Allison. Stephanie?
Am I?
Stephanie, I'm sorry.
According to Robert's rules, and this has been a discussion that we have looked at several times, and we even actually had the Pam, and I don't remember her last name, from the School Board Association. I have it in an email from her. You can add anything to the agenda, action item or not, to be voted on by majority before the agenda is approved. So therefore, Charlene requesting that this be added to the agenda tonight as a new business action item should be able to be voted on. While this is a new item because the board, the previous board, has voted to approve the Ravens. We are now voting to change, well, I shouldn't say it because I don't know the wording, from the Ravens to the Raiders. It does not speak about the moniker. It only speaks of the wording. So if the moniker goes out of it, it is definitely a new agenda item. Thank you.
Ann put her hand up now.
Oh, Ann? Okay, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks. You're saying the same thing. To get an item on the agenda, it's a simple majority vote. And then once it's on the agenda, if it gets on the agenda, because it wasn't warned previously, it is a 2/3 vote required to pass that item.
Okay. So,
Charlene's hand up
okay,
again.
I've heard, is that
Charlene has her hand up again.
Charlene?
I'm going to disagree on that, that this is, the majority of the board is asking for something to be put on the agenda. Robert's Rules of Order is a guideline for conducting business. And all items on the agenda, we're conducting business, and we're expected that motions are going to be made on items of business. That's conducting business. Motions will be made, discussions will be made, action or not, it's a new item.
Okay, I think what I'd like to do right now, just for everybody, I would like to,
Can I say something? I've been nice to
sure, I'm sorry, Tina, I didn't see you.
No, it's okay.
Okay?
I have the screens and like a phone that's moving.
All right.
I just want to put out some thinking items, and have everybody kind of, I know we all have our opinions on what this may look like, and we have our very determined convictions around where this should go, as they should be. I just want to make sure that we are identifying to everybody and to ourselves that this meeting needs to progress and to proceed, and that we have many items on the list today to cover. We have gone through this already. We have detailed Robert's rules through the ad hoc committee, so we have now created an expectation that Robert's rules are the items that we're looking at, because we spent all this time looking back and procedural stuff that was done previously. So we can't just pick and choose whenever we want Robert rules to be the meaningful piece of the puzzle. I'm not a Robert rules advocate. I have my opinions of that as well, but we've chosen the board to fine-comb Robert rules and make that our way of looking at things. So that is why this is becoming a big item right now. The other thing that I would like to put out there, so what's the end game here? So come March, we have a new board come up. Like, are we going to go through this every season, like a seasonal item? Is this going to be a seasonal item that keeps coming back? To what end? I really would love to know the end game plan here, because as much as I feel strongly about the way it should go, I also feel strongly that we need to continue our operations. So there's no way that we can go through a derailed meeting like we've had last month with all of the items we have on the list right now. So just food for thought. This is no one side against the other. This is overall, what are we creating to be able to move forward for the current board and for the future boards coming after us?
Okay, I think I'm going to draw the date right now, and I will say that the point of order on this was not well taken, that I'll allow this vote to go through, but I would assume there will be a point of order called when we get to the agenda, so at least we can get to the budget, please. I agree with Dina, we have a lot to go through. We have an executive session in the beginning, budget, and then we can, once it's on the agenda, as Allison said, once it's on the agenda, it's a simple majority, but after that, then we will put it on, then I will hear any points of order once we get to that point of the agenda, because we really need to get the budget. So I will call a vote on putting it on the agenda, not saying it's going to happen, but putting it on the agenda, and then we will discuss the point of order then, so at least then we can get through the budget process. So I think I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, and I'll ask my clerk to do that.
Can you actually state the amended agenda item and where it will be? So that we are voting on appropriate agenda?
I believe they're putting on the new old business, and it was to action item to change the moniker from Ravens to Raiders, I think is the terminology.
So it's Trish's motion.
Yep, it's actually my motion, so,
thank you, Trish.
Hurley, this is, the motion would be to discontinue.
You have to amend your motion, then I just need to know what it's going to look like on the agenda. I
Okay.
need your motion when the agenda item comes up.
Okay, so to discontinue the Raven name and adopt the Raider name.
You're just saying put the changing the Ravens to Raiders back on the agenda.
Correct.
Okay?
And I think...
Please, roll call.
Item number, please, Curry.
That would be 8B. I'm
Thank you.
sorry, 8B. And again, let's get through the budget and everything, and then we can discuss points of order when that comes up.
All right, running Ann,
No.
Allison,
No.
Kathy,
No.
Tricia,
Yes.
Stephanie? Stephanie?
Yes.
Charlene?
Yes.
Evan?
No.
Dina?
No.
Oh, is that everybody else?
Give me a Brittany and you.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. Looking at the screen now. Brittany, yes, thank you.
And
Aaron?
you.
Yes, and that's 5 yeses, 5 noes.
Okay, and I will break the tie to put it on the agenda, and points of order can be discussed when it hits that part. So I will be a yes, that's breaking the tie. Okay?
Thank you. 6-5.
Thank you. All right, so now we need to approve the agenda. We approve putting that on, and now we need to approve the agenda. So I'm looking for approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second?
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Aaron, please do a roll call for that, please.
For the agenda as well?
Yes, please.
Agenda. Ann?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Can somebody help me? I'm not understanding.
Dan
Said
said
yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, I'm sorry. Allison?
No.
Brittany?
Yes. Yes.
Arlene?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes, with serious concerns.
Tricia?
Yes.
Kathy?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Stephanie?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I really don't have a prepared list. So then there's myself, yes,
And Dina?
and Dina, thank you. Dina?
Yes.
Okay. So it votes by a majority to approve the agenda.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we have a consent agenda. The
8 to
consent
2.
agenda, includes the minutes of the previous meetings, personnel memorandum 627, 2 bid awards, Stafford Tech and bus bids, the tuition rates, the Rutland City calendar, which is draft, and policies for the second reading of methods of operation in Board of School Commissioners Code of Conduct. Do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda, to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to accept.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any questions, concerns, or feedback? And I'm going to rely upon you, Rob, if there's any in the room.
Seeing none.
Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. And those opposed?
Everyone here is a
Okay,
yes.
so carries. All right. So, protocol review, we've gone through the protocols. I'm not going to really do a big review on those. I do want to remind everybody that our important business tonight is talking about the budget. The budget does need to be approved and the wording needs to be on the ballot. Is there any public input?
We have a hand up on the board, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, who's that?
Allison's hand is up.
Okay.
Okay, so
Allison?
I would like to raise a point of personal privilege. And I want to apologize for raising my voice to be heard during the recess at the December 14th board meeting. Chair Hurley Kavakis and Clerk Aaron Schimpf were out of line and out of order when speaking over me and my point of order and improperly declaring a recess, while I had the floor to present the point of order. After recess was declared, Commissioner Brittany Kavakis hurled profanity at me. Then Chair Kavakis began to yell at me as to why my point of order was wrong. This is another violation, as he had declared a recess. He should not continue discussion. This is when I stood and forcibly told him to not speak to me until we were back in public session where business should occur. Aside from violating open meeting law with improper recess and de facto executive session, the board should also be concerned with whom the chair is representing. If Chair Kavakis is representing the board and the district, there would be no need to involve his personal attorney. However, if Mr. Kavakis is representing the interests of himself, he may need a personal attorney. That should make the board and the public very wary of his role as a school board chair. And just to clarify, the job of the school board chair is to run a fair and impartial meeting, not throw procedure aside, bang the gavel, and unilaterally make decisions to get their own way. While my response may not have modeled ideal behaviors, I hope students and the community may learn the importance of standing up to abusive power and the importance of policy and procedure as adopted by governing boards. RCPS spent thousands of dollars to review 9 months' worth of meetings chaired by myself last year. The attorney found them to be procedurally sound and fair meetings. Since then, the board has sat through hours of training, talk of inclusivity, and working together. After all the time and money the district spent, it is disappointing that half the board and the chair are willing to destroy our schools and community to focus on regaining a mascot rooted in characterization and stereotyping of marginalized race, rather than promote any forward movement or growth for our district and our community. With Mr. Kavakis and Ms. Shrimps toting 26-year combined service on this board, it is extremely disappointing that they could not think of one of the many possible ways to move the important business of last meeting forward. The clerk can make motions and vote. They are supposed to know and uphold Robert's Rules of Order. The clerk is a party to the agenda setting and as such are often the primary motion makers. When the board was silent on voting, they could have simply called a roll call vote, proposed an abbreviated agenda, let the board know what time-sensitive material was on the agenda or who they had in attendance to address the board. However, the clerk decided to pull out and look at her phone, and the chair decided to bang the gavel and declare the meeting in recess until today, January 11th. The chair does not have unilateral authority like he likes to use, and because of his abuse of power and disregard for procedure, the meeting was cut short. I am asking for public apologies from Hurley Kavakis, Aaron Schimpf, and Brittany Kavakis. I am also asking them to spend 30 minutes watching the VSBA webinars to review what their roles are and review the duties of a school board. I also would like them to take a few hours and read the abbreviated version of Robert's Rules of Order. Once there is some basic understanding of our elected duties and acknowledgement of harm done, the board can move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will respond. I will apologize to Allison. I do apologize to that, but my actions were okay. We did have those reviewed about how it was done. One of the issues that is ongoing, so you brought it up, was the past meetings. You probably are not aware, but I was given the night that the Raven vote was taken, and this was given to Mr. Leopold, that your clerk at that time texted me saying the decision's already been made prior to this meeting.
Point of order.
Yep.
This is not a rebuttal. This is my point of personal privilege. If you would
not, okay, that's fine, Allison.
Can I have personal privilege then?
No, we're not going to go into the sure, everybody can have it. Go for it.
I have sat for the last almost 2 years listening to this board. And one of the reasons I ran is listening to the back and forth between Allison and Hurley. While I respect both of them to an extent, the embarrassment that you two have caused this board over the last almost 2 years is an embarrassment to our district. You both need to apologize. Allison, to reach across, Isabel and Lauren is disgusting. Take yourself in check. As adults, we need to take ourselves in check. We, as a board, need to represent not only our students, our teachers, our non-salary, all of the above. But the display back and forth between the two of you, personal or not, needs to stop. This board cannot and will not move on. The Raider issue is not the only thing that has divided our board. In the last 4 years, we have had other issues that have divided this board. Every few years, there is something that continues to divide this board. As adults, we need to show the students how to conduct ourselves. As I have said to several of you in committee meetings, the real work on this board is done in committee meetings, not when all 11 of us are together. I have sat in board meetings with almost everybody except for Allison, and I believe in Hurley. I think I have sat in all with everyone else. We laugh, we joke, we get the work done. As a whole board, we do not get the work done. We are an embarrassment to our community. So as a board, it is time to step up and do what we are asked to do as elected officials, which is to be for the students and the teachers and the rest of the administration, the faculty, whatever word you want to use to describe everybody who is in RCPS. At this point, when it comes to the Raiders/Ravens, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Come together, accept the various things that are asked of us in the code of conduct, this, that, or whatever else, in the guidelines that we have as board members. Step up to the plate, do what you need to do, put your own personal stuff aside, whether it's wearing a mask, whether it's wearing whatever, I don't care. Put it aside. We have a responsibility as elected officials to the city of Rutland and to these students of Rutland to do what we need to do. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, you had your hand up, and then Bill.
Can I respectfully ask everybody, we have a lot to do tonight. It's very serious business in the toughest weeks of the pandemic. I would just ask the board to move on to the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, is there any public input?
I see one hand up. Stand by.
Okay.
Okay, here's what you have to do next meeting. Come sit right up here. And we're gonna unmute you, maybe not. And I'll turn that on. You can sit right there. And if you look right in the camera, that's you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you need any information or know who I am? Or?
Name, address is great.
Okay, my name is Karen Bossi, and I reside at 16 Southern Boulevard in Rutland City. I became interested in this board because of the Raider issue. As a lifelong resident of Rutland City, having children and grandchildren who have gone to Rutland High School, myself, my parents, my grandparents having gone to Rutland City schools. I feel strongly that the Raider logo is something that truly identifies the school spirit, motto. I've attended many football games since the Raven name was adopted. I do not hear the Raven name being shouted out by the audience. I hear Rutland, I hear Red, I hear Raiders. No one says, "Go Ravens." I feel like the teams have an identity crisis. They don't even know who they are because no one identifies them as Ravens. It's been said many times by this board that the students were given an opportunity to decide or have input on this issue. It's my understanding that the initial survey that went out to students had a comment section for which many students replied they wish to keep the raider name. That was thrown out, and then another survey was put out where the comment section was eliminated and only the choices, 4 choices or how many ever choices were given to the students on choosing a mascot. The bigger issue, I think, is the behavior of several members of this board, which is an embarrassment. It's like you don't understand. You work for the taxpayers of this city, for which I am one. My taxes, my property taxes have gone up 8% this year. Now I'm being told that because of the change to the Ravens, I and other taxpayers of this city are expected to shell out money for new uniforms, which to me is a complete waste. But I think the bigger issue is there are many people, and if this board cannot make a decision, which it seems it cannot, then this should be put on the ballot as a ballot item and let the taxpayers decide whether it's going to be Ravens or Raiders. And as I said, I have sat on the select board in Rutland Town, was on the board of aldermen in Rutland City. I have never seen Robert's Rules of Order being thrown around like it is for individual purposes to get my opinion there. And whether you support Ravens or Raiders, that should not be the defining issue of this board or of the treatment of the taxpayers. We were told at the last meeting that the Ravens issue would be put on the agenda for this meeting. And then we find out on Friday that it does not appear on the agenda. What is going on with this? Why are you just continually using Robert's Rules of Order to try to get your own way? Let this issue go forward and people decide on it. And as I said, if you can't decide, let the voters of the city of Rutland do it. Amen. They can do your job for you. Thank you.
I think that's it.
Sorry, Harry, I had your volume down. What'd you say?
What was that lady's name? We didn't hear it.
Karen Bossy.
Karen Bossy. Okay, thank you. All right. Nobody else, Mr. Bliss?
That's it.
Okay. Hearing none, I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations. Premature release will put the board at a substantial disadvantage.
So moved. Second.
You move, Stephanie?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of going into the executive session, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, hearing none, we will log out of this one and log into the new one. Isabella back in.
On the screen, I sent our students emails because I don't have their phone numbers.
Yeah, I see both Isabella and Lauren.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Bliss, how are we looking on the quick break?
We're in. Everybody here in the room is back in the room.
Is Mr. Bliss back?
Yeah. I'm right here, Mr. Marcus.
Okay. How are we looking at the quick break? Is everyone back?
That's too close, I think. It's too close to you?
No, it's not on.
Oh.
Now it's on. How's that, Hurley?
Sorry.
Are we all back in order?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So, is there student representatives there?
Yes, we are here.
Okay, I will turn it over to you two now. Lauren or Isabella, whoever wants to start.
I can go first. Rutland Middle School is very excited to begin our lifelong sports program. Our students will be engaging in a variety of different activities around Rutland County, including rock climbing, downhill skiing, bowling, Nordic skiing, indoor golfing, and many more. We are excited for our students to gain these experiences in our own community. Our teachers are stepping up to the plate in a big way, supporting our students and their families as we navigate these hard times. We continue to be grateful for their dedication and commitment to Rutland Middle School and our students. At RHS, congratulations to seniors Owen Doobie Johnson and Jenna Montgomery Concha, who have been selected as one of Vermont's 2022 presidential scholars. All students selected at the Vermont level will be submitted to the U.S. Department of Education for consideration as presidential scholar at the national level. Congratulations also to Cassidy Wells, who earned first place in the prose category at the Colchester speech tournament. Also kudos to Abbott Alawi, the team captain, who earned a second place finish in impromptu. Finally, a shout out to Slade Postensky. Gatorade announced Slade Postensky the 2021 to 2022 Gatorade Vermont Player of the Year. He is the 6th Gatorade Vermont Player of the Year to be chosen from Rutland High School. The award, which recognizes not only outstanding athletic excellence, but also high standards of academic achievement and exemplary character demonstrated on and off the field, distinguished Postensky as Vermont's best high school football player. Congratulations, Slade. Allen Street campus is finishing up the construction of an insulated compost bin system with the assistance of our community partner, 350 Rutland County. 350 Rutland is a local environmental conservation organization that promotes climate justice in Rutland County. The new insulated bins keep our compost active regardless of the below freezing weather conditions we experience in the city. Year-round composting is one part of our larger vision, becoming a regenerative campus that produces organic, healthy food options for our community. Thank you, that's all for today.
Okay, Isabella, I just saw her left, but did she sign back in? And I do not see Commissioner Kefauver. Let's wait just a second to see. Isabella was on, and then she. Lauren, could you possibly message her to see?
Yes, I just messaged her. I'll see what she says.
Okay, thank you so much. Can someone message Kevin, possibly? I'm looking for him.
She said her computer stopped working and she's trying to come back on a different device.
Okay, we can wait a minute for that. That's fine. Okay. Rob, can you reach out to Kevin?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Thank you, sir.
I texted him, Rob.
I would hate to start without either one. So we're going to be talking about school choice limits. There it is. Kevin.
You might have to go.
Isabella is still trying.
She said that you guys can move on if that's easier because she doesn't know if her computer works.
Okay. Understandable, thank you. Is there anything that you can add, Lauren, that she might have, or? I know you do different schools.
The one thing I have is that the RHS Environmental Club has been working with 350 to plant trees throughout Rutland County along the bike path. They will continue working through the springtime in various locations around Rutland. And then I'm not sure what the rest of the report was on the elementary schools.
Okay. All right, thank you, Lauren. All right, next is our school choice limits. Every year at this time, you have to renew or re-vote on limiting for school choice. Mr. Olson, would you like to?
I'll start early. So, like you said, every year the board has to make a motion and approve the school choice limits for students going out and students coming into the high school. So I'm not talking about students where, like Rutland Town or Barstow, where they have choice to come to any high school that they want. We're talking about students transferring between high schools. Like we have students that come in from Mill River, Otter Valley, Fairhaven, etc. And we have students going out to those places as well. So our current limit right now is we've had this for quite a while, I think, 40 students going out and 40 students coming in. There's a formula for how many students can go out. There's a limit to it. And currently we're right at that limit, 40 students going out. There's no formula for how many students can come into your high school. You could open it up if you wanted to, or you could limit it. But you know, we feel like the point where it's set right now is a good point, 40 coming in. And that's kind of the framework. It explains it in the memo. But we're going to ask Steve just to give us a brief overview of where we're at currently with school choice this year.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me tonight. Yeah, everything I have to say is in the outline that's provided in your packet. I'll just go over some of these topics real quickly. We've begun the timeline. The application period started when we returned from our December recess and will run through the end of February. The need for a lottery will depend on how many applicants we'll have for the program. Right now, we anticipate 15 openings for the 22-23 school year. And the way the lottery works is if there are 15 or fewer applicants, each applicant automatically is accepted. If there are more than 15 applicants, we would have to have a lottery. The first 15 of those students who are selected can enroll at Rutland High School, and then the remaining students in the lottery make up a prioritized wait list. And as it says here, we began this year with 8 students on the wait list. So the next item is the numbers for this year so far. We have 37 students coming in, so 37 school choice in students. We have 16 students who are going out, so that gives us a net gain of 21 students. And then the last section gives you a breakdown of the number of students in by grade level and the number of students out by grade level.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I know we've had discussions in the past about if we need to raise the limit and if what the recommendations are. So I'm going to open it up to debate. And Bob, I'm going to rely upon you on who's there. Hands up.
You have a hand up from Allison.
Okay, Allison?
So, yeah, I was just wondering, since our limit is 40, we only have 37 in. First off, did we clear some of that wait list? And do the people on the wait list get a priority for the following year, or is that just year to year?
Yeah, we work through the wait list as we go through the year. And the wait list is only good for that year. So once we get into the process for next year, we begin a new cycle. So students don't remain on the wait list for the next year.
Thank you. And then my other question is there, I believe there's a date that we have to set our limits by? Is that
Yeah, it's February 1st. Right at the beginning.
Okay, so it's prior to knowing, we can still get applications after the fact.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Steve runs the lottery, so when does that happen, in March, Steve? Is that when you start setting?
Yeah, it's usually the first week in March.
Yeah. So I guess I should make one more thing clear I forgot to mention. So we are not getting tuition payments for these students, nor are we paying tuition payments to other schools for that. So pushing for a higher in number it's not going to bring any more money into the district.
Stephanie, that I can see.
So, we don't receive money, we don't request, so is the limit we use of the 40 students because of not receiving money? And so kind of like a slash, why are we limiting that number?
I'll let Bill answer that.
Yeah, I think historically we set that number, and I'm not sure where the board lined up a long time ago with that. It seems like they've decided to go with 40 and 40 years ago. There is no, like I said, there is no money coming in. I think it's a good number as far as it kind of hits about where we usually get to every year. I mean, Steve had a waiting list at the beginning of the year, and then it kind of melted away as time went on. And now we're actually, when you look at it, we're actually underneath our limit.
So then my follow-up question is, so I make it as a sophomore,
Yep.
do I automatically make it as a junior and senior? And then
You're in for good.
So so once you make it in, you're in for good, so I am not included in that 40 anymore?
No, you are in the 40, and so if
Yeah.
at the bottom of Steve's chart, you can see where the numbers are for the younger grades coming up.
And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe this began prior to the state allowing school choice, when the local school districts, and Rob, you can probably remember this, the local school districts got together and set limits of either percentages or numbers for each school. And I think the max that they put at that point was 40. Am I correct, Rob?
Yeah, you're in the ballpark, and basically this region was the leader in the state in this kind of exchange program. There was no money exchange then, and what you see laid out now is basically what the statute is and what we've been doing. Steve's the expert, and Bill knows it best because he's been at the high school as well.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions actually on this memo when I went through, so I have way too many at this point to bog down the meeting at this point. So I'm just going to end my questions for tonight on school choice, and maybe Steve, you and I can get together and you can answer the rest of my questions and go from there.
Sure, yeah, anytime you have questions, feel free to call. I did just notice one mistake, an error in my haste. We'll actually have 18 openings. If you look at those numbers in that final section, 15 seniors, 10 juniors, that adds up to 37. And if we go with the number of 40 incoming students, that would mean we have 18 openings, not 15. So the anticipated opening should be 18, not 15.
And Steve, anybody else have questions or comments? Kevin, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make a motion that we approve the limits as they have been. I don't mean to cut off discussion, I just wanted to get a motion on the table.
Okay. All right, thank you, Kevin. Is there a second? Okay, Brittany, thank you. Is there any other discussion before we... All right, all those in favor of the limits of 40, signify by saying aye, or raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Isabella has joined us, so I would like for her to do her report. That's okay.
Sorry about that. I had a similar issue that you had earlier, Mr. Kavakis, so.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll be reporting on December and January due to our other meeting. In December, RIS students and staff have focused on empathy and gratitude for our school-wide character traits. Mr. Brewer helped construct a gratitude chain that stretched down the corridors. It was really quite impressive. Our current focus this month is courage and persistence. Just last week, the school-wide token bucket was filled to the brim. We are looking forward to our second school-wide celebration at the end of the week. During the month of December, many RIS students benefited from kindness shown throughout our community. We would like to offer a very special thanks to the Rutland City Police Department for their partnership during the holiday season. RIS Northeast and Northwest students were able to shop with a cop in December. This was an extremely positive experience for both students and the police officers involved. Tatum's Totes and WSYB were also instrumental in spreading joy to our students during the holiday season. Families have been receptive to our Test to Stay effort. It is another step towards keeping our schools open and students present. We are appreciative of all the cooperation we are receiving from Northeast and Northwest. Northwest children participated in an exciting drumming event offered in collaboration by our wonderful music and PE teachers, Carrie Cole and Brian Cooper. Students love learning about rhythm, sound, and movement as they make music together. Northwest and Northeast students enjoyed turkey, potatoes, and all the fixings at Thanksgiving feast offered through our lunch program. We appreciated every bite. Music concerts took place at Northeast and Northwest in December. Music teacher Carrie Cole prepared children for a virtual concert, one class at a time, and each class's concert videos were sent to parents via Seesaw. During the months of November and December, Northwest students focused upon citizenship and gratitude. After classroom-wide goals were met, the whole school celebrated by enjoying a virtual dance party. Northeast students focused on kindness and gifts from the heart. Students collected items to donate to the Rutland County Humane Society and delivered them on December 15th. Northwest and Northeast Clifford yearbook opportunities this month involved book giveaways, where all students walked away with the proud owner of 2 new books. I also just wanted to comment about some of the stuff that's been going on in our board meetings, if that's okay. I wanted to add to my student report. Okay, thank you. I wanted to add to my student report today to advocate for the student body. I'm a little disappointed that this has continued to toil our meetings. Thank you to Ms. Casello, who messaged me in support of speaking on the issue. You all received an email from me a few weeks ago in regard to the same issue. This board cannot get anything done under these circumstances. Rutland City is supposed to, quote, cultivate a passionate, diverse, and resilient community of critical thinkers. But how are we supposed to do so when we are stuck in the same position? I want to be able to be a part of a school climate that does not include a racist mascot or a school board of adults clinging to said mascot. Once again, I will say that the board was elected to serve students like me, yet we cannot even get to the important agenda items like budgets, teacher contracts, and even pandemic resolutions. Please, consider once again that this is not about us. This is about the students. For the students' sake, focus on the best interests of our district, and finally, be kind to one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Questions of Isabella on the report that she gave on schools? Brittany?
Yeah, Isabella, I didn't know if you knew this, but at Northwest, I wanted to thank them. They sent me to Kentucky with about 60 cards that the kids had made over before Christmas break that I was able to bring down to the students of Mayfield, Kentucky, where I was doing work down there, and they were very appreciative, and I was very thankful of Northwest School. I think there were kindergartners and first graders that constructed little wreaths with cards, and I was able to bring that down. So I just wanted to put that in there.
That sounds awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And Stephanie, a question on the report?
Not a question, just a comment.
Okay.
So I think very highly of Lauren and Isabella as our student reps, and I enjoy hearing what each school is doing, but again, you're the student rep, and I believe that you should represent the entire student body and not an individual or a segregated group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Okay. Mr. Olson, I believe that you are up for the superintendent's report, and I do believe that I heard Secretary French on CAX today with another change.
That's right. I'm going to get to that just in a minute. I'll try to shorten things down a little bit. I had a long report, and we've used a lot of time, so I do want to spend a little time to...
That is fine, Mr. Olson. We do need to hear the report, so that's okay.
Thanks. I wanted to offer my sympathy and our sympathy and condolences to the family of Guy Babb. Guy was a long-serving engineering instructor at Stafford Tech. He was a remarkable father, a husband, and a human being. He was an educator that was truly loved by his students, and we all appreciate the time that Guy shared with us in our school community. And I know that services for Guy are listed in the Rutland Herald, so I hope people would please support that family. He's a tremendous teacher and a tremendous man. I'll be brief. I want to mention quickly that Rutland High School had an 8th grade open house set up for this Thursday, and I believe they are changing that to a remote open house because of the pandemic right now and the way the virus is behaving. So information for that is at the high school. I'll briefly alert the board that we've been in contact with the USCRI of Vermont regarding refugee resettlement and Afghan refugees, and there's a distinct possibility that new Americans will be settling in our community in the next few months at least. We might not get a lot of lead time on that, so we're trying to plan now for that. Rob has been spearheading that and been in contact with that organization, and we are looking for possibly supporting our EL instruction, depending on the numbers. We don't know the numbers, but we're just trying to prep for that. Ultimately, we want to make sure that any students that come into our community and their families are welcomed and cared for, and they quickly get the understanding that they belong to Rutland, a great place. So we'll have more on that to come as that happens. I do want to congratulate the staff at Rutland Intermediate School. This happened a little bit ago, and I didn't get to announce it. That school is recognized for its work on positive behavioral interventions and supports at the annual Vermont PBIS Leadership Forum. So they were recognized as a strong school in this. That work at RIS is being highlighted for other schools to learn from and to use. So congratulations to that whole school. Lauren mentioned Slade, Gatorade Player of the Year. That's a really high award. Hard to get. Lauren mentioned also Jenna Montgomery Contra and Owen Doobie Johnson and Ashley Hewitt. I don't know if you mentioned her or not, Lauren. She's an Otter Valley student, and she also received honorable mention for that award. She's at Stafford's Health Careers. I don't remember how our last meeting went, where we had middle school students coming in. I just want to make sure their names got mentioned, because I don't think they were on the agenda. Those middle school students, Danielle Goldberg, Kylan Champagne, Mackenzie Barnes, and Olivia Clowert. They were recognized last month by the Vermont Board of Education for their distinguished work in the 2021 Rutland County Writing Contest. And so I just wanted to make sure they got congratulated. And I also wanted to thank English teacher Chris Van Skyver for being an inspiration and an advocate for those kids. They did a great job. So now to COVID, Mr. Kavakis. Secretary.
Yeah, he did have a change today, I think, right?
Yeah, there was a press conference today, and I'll try to give you a little bit of information on that, but we don't have all of it yet, so it's probably going to be coming out over this week. I'll first start by saying we're really urging families to get vaccinated or get a booster shot if you haven't gotten that yet. That's the best fight against the Omicron variant, and we know we've had a lot of cases over the last week and a half. It's surging across the state, so vaccination helps. The state changed its guidance last week, right before we came back from vacation, and now again today there's going to be some changes about how we operate And what they're really trying to do is just basically keep up with the Omicron variant, which is hard to keep up with. It's been spreading so quickly. So the methods that we used before aren't really effective. We don't have the capacity to keep up with the practices that we were doing before. So the state's changing its guidance, and we will get written guidance, but we haven't gotten it yet, so just be alert for that coming. I'll say that the staff has worked extremely hard to keep schools open. It's really a day-to-day proposition, and the beginning of the week we were worried. Today was a lot better, but I want to thank the staff, first of all, for really contributing to try to make sure kids are in school. We want our kids to be in the building. Adding to that, we implemented Test to Stay last week, and that's been going well. Although the rise in cases makes it challenging, but that has been helpful for making sure kids stay in the building. So getting back to the changes that Secretary French talked about today, the contact tracing process that we have been doing is, we can't do it to the extent that we were doing it before. There's just too many cases to keep up with. So they were going to change contact tracing to become a more generalized process. So in other words, before we might have looked at a classroom, and if I was a positive case, maybe Charlene is the person who was a close contact to me, but everybody over there is okay. But that was hard to do. We'd have to be mapping out where people were sitting, basically, or even on a bus, to know if they were close contacts or not. Now, as we understand it, if we had a case in a classroom, our job is going to be to notify parents that there's a case in the classroom, so everybody in the room would know that there was a case that they might have possibly been in close contact with, and that will be how we let people know about cases. As far as testing goes, that's going to go back to the parents and the families to do. So I think our Test to Stay program is going to shift pretty soon, maybe next week, to a testing at home process where the state is going to supply us with tests for families to use, and if you happen to be exposed, you're unvaccinated, you make sure that you'd be testing your child and be able to keep track of it that way. So we don't have the details on that yet in all the specifics, but we hope to have them as they write them, and we will send that information out. I did want to say, if I can take 2 more seconds to talk about how things are going in schools, and I just want to credit people for working amazingly hard. I had a couple of examples. I'll just mention someone by name. I talked to Justine Franco, who's our COVID coordinator. She's a nurse at the high school. She has that designation of COVID coordinator, and she told me the other day that she has worked during the vacation, every single day during the vacation except for Christmas and New Year's, making sure to connect with families and helping them with cases. I had 2 elementary school principals, administrators, who were yesterday actually doing Test to Stay, and they have a team that does it in the morning. They kind of do it from, I don't know what their times are, 7:30 to 8:30 or 7 to 8, somewhere around there. When their team goes in to teach class, they took over, and they said, we did Test to Stay from that period, it must have been like 8:30 or so, all the way up to almost 1 o'clock, those 2 administrators. They wanted to make sure the kids could stay in the building. And I've heard about some high school teachers who are making sure that kids who might be quarantining right now are going to be ready for exams next week, by personally making sure they get the information that they need to have. So we have a lot of people that are being heroes out there, and if you can give me a second to read, this is a letter that Rob Bliss wrote to our administrators as he toured the buildings the other day, and I just want to read it to you just so you get a sense of what's happening in the buildings. It will take a second, and Rob does a great job of explaining this is how dedicated our staff are. So I'll pick it up near the beginning. He said, I went to Northeast this morning to check on Suzanne and her team, Suzanne Engels. I found Suzanne in her office having a cheery conversation, as cheery as she could, with a mother who she was telling that child couldn't come to school today because of a COVID contact, and the Test to Stay capacity had maxed out. The mom would have to wait until Monday. Suzanne explained that the parent on the phone was completely understanding and pleasant, even after getting short notice that her day's plans had to change. I was so impressed with Suzanne's understanding, her clear and positive approach to a potentially difficult and too often repeated conversation. Suzanne made the mom feel like she was the most important person with that call. I walked down the hall to see the Northeast Test to Stay setup. I was moved by the positivity and the teamwork of the group. They were upbeat, focused, and really enjoying their time there. They cheered as the test revealed negatives and said with great care, if they got a positive, Sally needs a call to home. There was nothing sad, angry, worn out, or stressed about the team. It was uplifting. I drove to Northwest to check in there. On the way, I stopped at RMS and RIS. In both schools, the kids were getting ready for the day. Test to Stay at RIS was still on. I found Carrie Course at work in the TTS room, Test to Stay room, carefully going over the spreadsheet that they use with one of the RIS team and advising how adding another column would improve understanding and efficiency. The conversation was calm and supportive. On my way out, a teacher darted out of her classroom to exclaim, "It's Pajama Day." I usually don't dress like this. It was a chance for the kids to have some fun. At Northwest, I went to the gym and found Lauren Pep and her team doing TTS. The students waiting sat around an actual TV watching a Scooby-Doo video while they waited their turn. Here's the best part. I watched Margaret Torrey swab a kid's nose. She talked the student all the way through it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the other nostril. Margie smiled and looked at the student's eyes the entire time, and the kid never flinched. She so trusted the people caring for her that it was not a problem. Lauren cheerfully worked with another staff member on who needed to be called next. Here's the point. What I saw as our employees work for our students is the joy they bring and receive from the interactions. It was another example of why we all do the job. The kids need us and we need them. We care for them, we nurture them, we love them. All the while, we clothe them, feed them, and teach them. We teach them to be better people and care for others. Thanks to you and your teams for lifting me up today. So that was from Rob, describing a typical day in an atypical time. And thank you. That's the end of my report.
Okay, any questions of Superintendent Olson?
You give an audience question, Harley.
Okay.
I'm curious.
Yes.
I was curious as far as the new guidance for the COVID test to stay and testing. When does that actually switch over? I saw that there was a halt to testing and contact tracing as our staff and faculty are so overly taxed at the moment. I mean, it's clear they're just buried with everything, and with the surge going on, this is a cumbersome extra load for them to carry. And my understanding was that testing to stay was to halt immediately, and the shifts were going to happen immediately, and they were not going to be testing this week, but I know schools were utilizing test to stay still this week. So my question is, why is Rutland still testing if they were to halt?
Heather, right? Is that
yes.
Right? Heather. I haven't seen anything that says halt immediately. What I've heard, what I've read, is that when they're going to send us tests for families to use, and as we get those tests, we're going to distribute them back out. So you would have them to be able to do that with your family, and then we make that transition. If I understand correctly, they're promising or they're hoping to get those out by next week. So as I read the guidance, they said, you know, you're doing what you're doing, and when you're ready to make that transition, which means do you have the tests and are you ready to distribute them, then you transition to that phase of what they're doing.
So it doesn't transition until the schools receive the tests to send home?
That's how I understand it, yeah.
I know I've seen, for instance, everyone was a close contact in Rutland essentially this week with our current surge.
Yeah.
I had 3 or 4 children contacted in some way. And one school, I hadn't had the chance to fill out the test to stay, yet my child, the way it fell, most of their 5-day quarantine was over the weekend anyway. They went back to school. My child was pulled down for test to stay, even though I hadn't signed the permission slip, and even though he should have been fine in school anyway. So the dates were off for their counting for their exposure. The dates were off for their contact tracing, and they were prepared to swab him anyway, even though the permission slip wasn't signed. And I'm just seeing that this is happening, and I know about this. Who knows what parents don't? These teachers are so overwhelmed by what's going on that I'm wondering, they're not able to stay on top of things. And how many other kids is this happening to? That they're, wrongfully being pulled out of class and sent home. I had another kid that they tried to send home because they said he had one more day. And I said, no, actually, you're wrong, he doesn't. The guidance you sent me was the wrong email. It's 5 days, not 14 anymore, and check your email, the date you sent me. He is actually able to be back in school. And she checked that, and she was like, oh, sorry, just kidding, I'll send him back. So I had 2 kids wrongfully sent out of school after being home. And I get they're trying to do their best, but they are so overloaded by this right now that it's like overwhelming. So curious why we're still doing it if it's, like the paper said, it's not working, and it's adding a burden to our faculty and staff that we so badly need teaching our children. So curious when it will stop.
Well, Carrie, my answer would be, we have an obligation to keep doing what we're doing until we are able to make the next switch. Right? We're trying to make sure that everybody's staying safe in the building, as overwhelming or overloading as it is. Right, I agree.
Just as long as they're doing the process correctly, because they're so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
A scary struggle.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else have questions of Superintendent Olson? Okay. I do believe, Ted, you are up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kavakis, and thank you to everybody. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen. And please let me know if you can see the title page for these charts.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you very much. Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks especially to the board for already investing 2.5 hours of your time this evening. I know this next topic probably isn't your favorite topic for 9 p.m. at night, but I'll do my best to cover some key points and answer your questions. If I use any terms that are unfamiliar to you, please stop me and let me know. I'll pause at the end of each page. So the focus tonight is for you to review a proposed 2023 district budget as well as proposed ballot language. I'll go ahead and flip to the next chart. Many of you are probably familiar with the structure of the ballot language, but just to be sure, the state mandates the same ballot language each year, including 3 budget-related numbers. One of our key deliverables tonight will be for the administration to request that the school board consider approving proposed budget language with these numbers filled in, which I'll show you after we walk through the budget drivers that will determine the estimates. I do want to remind everybody, as you probably have heard in previous presentations, that employee compensation, including both salaries and benefits, typically constitutes almost 80% of the total budget. And it's important to realize that state-provided metrics, and these are metrics from the Agency of Education for the number of equalized pupils, its percentage change, as well as state-provided metrics that impact property tax calculations, such as yield and common level of appraisal, are wrapped up in a number of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Any questions before I move on? Okay, thank you. So I have several key messages just to summarize for you here in comparing the proposed 2023 budget versus the one for fiscal 22 this year. And then after we review these messages at a high level, we'll go through a series of charts that will illustrate these points for you. One of the first messages is important because staffing is 80 cents on the dollar for our costs. Staffing remains flat based upon our projections and plan from 22 to 23. Now, although it's flat, that includes adding 10 ESSER-funded positions in the coming year, which basically, from a personnel standpoint, are offset by other staff reductions. Many of you have heard the presentations done in recent months by Rob and by Abby regarding the Essa federal grants, which are helping to support from a financial standpoint many of our recovery efforts. I'll talk about those, and I'm going to differentiate at some point between ESSER-funded costs as well as locally funded costs. And the reason for keeping this in mind, as you might recall, and you'll see on a few of our charts, is we'll talk about total expenses, what I call top-line expenses. Then from that, we always subtract the federal funding and local funding. The net cost after federal funding is the remaining cost to be funded by the state of Vermont. And it's that cost that determines what our average cost per pupil to the state of Vermont will be, and it's that cost that then drives the ultimate tax rate calculation. So, as I say to some people when they're talking about budgets, if you want to add $100,000 to top line expenses, you're free to do that as long as you add at least $100,000 of federal or local revenues so that the net impact is zero. Otherwise, we're going to have a bit more conversation. So the second point is that our total compensation costs are expected to increase by about 1.5% year to year after being held flat last year. Salary costs for this budget year 22 as well as 23 could exceed both the budget that we have this year and the one we're proposing for next, depending upon the outcome of 2 open labor negotiations. Those negotiations involve about 2/3 of our total salary costs, so that could have a material impact. And just as a rule of thumb, a 1% increase in teacher salaries each year costs the district about $200,000 in salaries plus related benefits increases. So we do have some exposure there. We are expecting cost increases in a number of other areas, which is different from last year, but I'm sure there's no surprise given inflation in facilities, utilities, and other costs that I'll talk with you about. Some good news is that our equalized pupil count is only down by about 0.5%. It's basically flat in the 1970 range for 23. Last year, our equalized pupil counts, and this is a metric that's calculated by the state AOE, declined by 2%, which was a driver to increased average cost per pupil. So we've only had the first iteration from the AOE of equalized pupils, and it is subject to revision. We'll see how that goes, but for the time being, it looks like we're holding fairly steady in that regard. Unfortunately for our district, there will be no impact of the rating study for the fiscal 23 budget. A task force completed its work in December, and its recommendations are moving to the House and Senate Education Committees for deliberation. We'll keep you posted on how that progresses. And so the net cost per equalized pupil for Rutland City Public Schools is projected to increase to $18.6 thousand. That's an increase of about 7.5%. That increase is in the range of the 6.5% increase we had last year. Let me stop there before I go on to ask if you have questions or comments. Is there any questions? Okay, and we're always free to flip back to a chart if a question does occur to you. Thank you. So this next chart shows you some staffing trends, starting with the leftmost column, which was the fiscal year 21 budget, and moving forward to the 22 budget for this year. It shows you some actual staffing counts during calendar 21, and then shows you the proposed fiscal 23 budget. And one of the first things I'll mention, starting from left to right, is you'll recall, I'm sure, that in this year's budget, we reduced our FTEs by about 17, dropping from 518 to 501. That was more than a 3% reduction, which helped to offset a variety of salary and benefits increases. That was key in helping us keep those compensation costs flat from 21 to 22. What's interesting is that during calendar 21, so as of mid-year in June of this year, the actual FTEs we had on our payroll were 483, obviously less than the total complement we have budgeted for this year. And as of December, we have 479 FTEs on the payroll, again below the complement. And part of that has to do with natural attrition and challenges in hiring to fill positions. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then what we're projecting is an increase back up to the 499 to 500 level for the fiscal 23 budget. And as you'll see from a small notation off to the side there, that increase of 20 is including an addition of 10 positions that will be funded by Essa grants. So there you have just the basic comparison. If you compare 21 budget to 23 budget at 501 and 499, the total employee count is staying about flat. But that does include the addition of 10 ESSER funded positions, which is largely offset by reductions we're going to accomplish elsewhere. In fact, if you look at the very last bullet point on this page, you'll note that the district is planning to realign and reduce about 6 positions in fiscal 23 through natural attrition. People leaving for professional reasons or electing to retire. And so the good news about that is we're going to reduce these positions without asking anybody to leave. What we have is we've got actually several positions, 3 in the category of what we call to be hired. These TBH positions were carried forward in the 22 budget, but we have been going through this year without needing to fill those jobs. And so rather than funding them again for 23, Bill and Rob and the administration have concluded that we can do some realignment and just simply eliminate those jobs from the budget in 23. And also with some of the retirements and other resignations that have occurred, the administrative leadership is looking at realignments that will reduce 3 FTE positions. So those 6 net will save the district about $667,000 year to year. That basically relates to the fact that an average teacher costs the district about $100,000 a year in salaries and benefits, and with some of the realignments, some positions will be replaced with shorter service, less expensive personnel versus those who are leaving, which saves an additional $67,000. So that's a high-level overview, and I'm just going to flip forward quickly to the next chart because that'll make the comparison a little bit more clear. That green bar shows you the total number of full-time equivalents at 489 before we add back the 10 ESSER positions and then 499 combined. So if you were to look at the reduction from 501 to 489, you would have about a 2.5% decrease in personnel, which is slightly more than the decrease in enrollment. So, we're looking for efficiencies that we can provide to save money wherever we can without doing harm to the quality and the continuity of our educational programs. Bill and Rob are working together with the principals, feel comfortable in being able to make these alignments. We wouldn't do it by choice, but obviously it's necessary to be as fiscally responsible as we can to the taxpayer. So let me stop there for a moment and ask if anybody has questions about those FTE trends.
And Dave just has her hands up.
Hi, thanks, Ted. That's pretty good for a layperson that's not in the numbers business for me. But I wanted to see if I'm understanding correctly. I wanted to ask you about the 10 ESSER positions. Are they existing positions? Are they existing monies in the budget? How long are they going to be? Oh, should I just wait? Or give them all my questions?
I thought you were finished with your question. Go ahead. I apologize.
So are they existing positions? Is the funding, in the budget, and are the positions existing also now? How long will the ESSER funds go for these positions? And how long will these positions be sustained? And then, at the end of the ESSER funding, which is 24, is that correct? Are these positions going away, or what's the plan for that sustainability?
Thank you, and those are really key questions, and I appreciate that. So To your first point, we are adding 10 positions in fiscal '23 for positions and services such as interventionists. Essa grants will fund in new positions and initiatives where those are focused upon providing recovery and other academic services that will help close gaps that were created by the pandemic. And so Rob and Abby, and working carefully with their counterparts at AOE, have ensured that we can add these interventionists and other positions to the budget for '23 and be qualified for ESSER funding. So, and I'll show you in a moment, these positions are going to cost about $875,000 in the first year, salary and benefits. We're expecting to get that same amount of money back in federal revenues, so there will be no net impact in cost to the local taxpayer or in our average cost per student. To your very key point about what happens after '23, the ESSER funds, depending upon whether you're talking about ESSER 2 or ESSER ARP3, expire either in 2023 or 2024. And knowing that, when these positions are hired for, the district is being very clear that these are either 1 or 2 year positions and that they will sunset with the funding. So there's no guarantee to people who are hiring on that they'll have this employment beyond that time. We've done this clearly to be transparent and to avoid creating any kind of fiscal cliff for our budget.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, then let me move on to how these FTEs translate into dollars. So this chart is going to show you our anticipated salaries and benefits in fiscal '23 compared to the '22 budget before the ESSER funding, before those 10 ESSER positions. And just so you can key in on that, you can see that in the FY23 budget column, I'm talking about the 489 FTEs for next year before those additional positions are added. The reason why I'm showing you this to start with is because it's more of an apples-to-apples comparison with what 23 would look like compared to a 22 basis. So what you can see there on the top line is the salary costs would be expected to increase by about $235,000, somewhat less than 1%. Now, we have built into the budget for '23 salary increases of a few percent for all employees and all represented groups. But we are also saving money by reducing positions, and those position reductions, though of a lesser extent than the previous year, still help to offset the cost increases. The same occurs in the benefits line. Benefits are going up more, as you can see, 3.5%, a total of $500,000. Higher per person costs for medical insurance, pension contributions, FICA, those are ongoing. We did have a little bit of good news in the benefits area in the sense that during calendar 21, the state changed one of its policies regarding what are called medical plan insurance buyouts. And basically what the state did was to adopt provisions that make it more difficult to qualify for those buyouts. And that change will save the district in '23 about $200,000. So that 504 would have been even higher without that beneficial change, which we appreciate. And of course, as you probably recall, medical insurance, we were expecting it was going to go up by 10%, as it has year to year in the past 2 years. This year it's going up by 5%, which helps moderate the cost. So the bottom line there, again, before we get into adding ESSER positions and adding ESSER revenues, is that the base compensation would increase by about $750,000, a little bit more than 1.5%, partly due to the reduction in full-time employees. Okay, let me go ahead now and let's take these numbers and let's put them at the top of the next chart and add in ESSER. So the first panel there, the compensation and full-time employee numbers, the ones we just reviewed, I have a text box over to the right side just to let you know that, ESSER isn't the only grant funding that we obtain to help pay for salaries. There are a myriad of other grants, some are large, some are small, that we apply for and receive every year in 23. We're anticipating that about $4 million of these compensation costs, almost 10%, will be funded by other grants. So, from a taxpayer point of view, you could look at that $47 million, you could think, well, $4 million of that is going to be paid for by federal grants other than ESSER. And of course, we try and find as many of those as we can. Now, I mentioned the ESSER positions adding about $875,000 this year for 10. That's a little bit lower average cost than our standard teacher, but of course it's in the range. And then when you add the before or excluding ESSER with the ESSER positions, you get the total district costs. And again, the reason why I've broken it out this way is because I didn't want to start off by telling you that our compensation is going to increase 1.6% and 3.5%. Without having you understand first that that's not going to be the net impact to the taxpayer. We're splitting it up into these pieces, but these are the total costs, and when we recommend budget ballot language for you, obviously we're going to have to include the $48 million for fiscal 23. And they are full-time employees. Any questions about that?
Ann has her hand.
Yes.
One quick thing to confirm in my mind, the ESSER funding for those employees, that includes salary plus benefits, correct?
Correct. Yes, it does, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, and that's an important point to reiterate that these positions do not have any net cost impact to the district. Well, you basically paid for them already because of your income tax dollars that you sent to Washington, D.C. We're just getting some of those back. Okay, so let's go on to the other 20%. All the other costs that constitute our budget. And the total expenses line that I'm going to show you at the bottom, the 61.6, just as a mention, that includes the $48 million of compensation from the previous chart. So once again, I'm showing you what the 22 budget was, a 23 budget recommendation, and some changes, both in terms of dollars and percent. And I have some notes off to the side so that we can understand a little bit what some of those drivers are. We're targeting, once again, as we did last year, to keep our direct instructional program costs, excluding the salaries and benefits from above, flat year to year. We're anticipating some increases in our special educational services. That tends to vary depending upon the mix of students and the services that we have, and that can change within the year. But at this point, $1.6 million is the snapshot that we have. We're expecting a significant increase in facilities and transportation, but here's where I'm going to ask you to look over to the side note. Because what you'll see is of that $1 million increase, $900,000 is for a special project, which will be ESSER funded, hence no net impact. We have to include it in our total expenses, but it will be netted out at the bottom or be netted out in the revenue area. For air quality and other purposes, the district is going to be replacing all of the carpet in all of the buildings with new material that will also be easier to maintain. So this is a project that we probably wouldn't be undertaking right now if it weren't for the availability of federal funding. But we have been approved to move forward for that, as Rob and Abby have described. There's a couple of other projects that we're including in this year's budget for almost $300,000 that are not yet qualified for ESSER funding, and that is roof repairs at the RIS cafeteria and at the Northwest Gymnasium. In the estimation of our facilities director, Glenn Scott, looking at the condition of those roofs, it's advisable that we do those repairs and replacements rather than risk significant water damage in the future. This is something that we've high-graded. Some of you may recall the Veritas facility study that was done within the last couple of years, and we feel that the time is right to move ahead with this before we have a more significant, more expensive problem. Food service is up about 4%. The state of Vermont actually sets a cap each year on what the allowable percentage increase can be in food service contracts. This year it's 3.7%. We agreed to that full amount with our services company because, if anything, food costs are up by 4%, if not more, and a fair amount of their labor is at minimum wage, which increased by 7% this January and 7% last January. So there's obviously cost pressure there. The financing costs are driven by our debt schedule. That's up about 6%. IT costs we have held flat at about $700,000 for the past few years. Our Director of IT, Patricia Agner, has identified some enhancements that we can do and some very timely upgrades and replacements. That's particularly important that we not fall behind on that, given the criticality of smooth and reliable IT services to the entire district operations. Obviously, if we are able to find at some point that some of that $145,000, $150,000 might qualify for Essa, though we've not verified that at this point, if we can do that, we certainly will. In utilities, electricity, heating, oil, gasoline, diesel, we're anticipating about a 1/3 increase, $200,000. The utilities costs are higher across the board for all major fuels. Heating oil is up more than 50% year to year. Gasoline, diesel up more than 50% year to year. Wood pellets, which we burn, also up in double digits. So this is just an unfortunate fact of life that we all face every day. And we're anticipating that other expenses will stay in the range of about $1.6 million. Hopefully we can find some efficiencies there. When you add up all those costs, you can see that the total, again, including compensation, is $61.6 million. That would be an increase of 6%, or about $3.3 million. But what I want to remind everybody is, while that's the total, if you look down below at the bottom of the chart in terms of a couple of the memo items we have, let's recall that of that amount, $1.8 million is for 2 initiatives that are ESSER funded, adding those 10 positions in the carpeting. So in a sense, the total expenses for the district, net of those ESSER initiatives and that ESSER funding, would be in a range of just under $60 million, an increase of a little under $2 million and 3% respectively. Given the inflation drivers that we have, if we can look as the year goes on and find opportunities to continue to save, we'll do that. In utilities, for example, we're looking at the frequency with which we can switch between burning heating oil versus wood pellets, and when it becomes economical to do one versus another. So we're hopeful that as the year goes on, we'll be able to find some savings, but at this point, this is our best snapshot. So I'll stop there and ask if there are questions or comments. Any questions?
Ian has her hand up.
Of course. I'm just fascinated by Essa. Okay, so we don't know if the 1770, or did you say, Ted, that the carpet project has been fully approved?
Yes.
Okay, and then the 10 new
positions also have been approved.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, there are other areas that we think we will be able to fund with Essa and bring initiatives forward, but since we don't have confirmation in those areas, we are not including them in the budgeted expenses or the budgeted revenues. So you may hear in the future, as Rob and Abby continue to bring updates forward to the school board during this coming year, that, we've identified this additional initiative, but we wanted to limit what we included here to what we know we can do. Okay, thank you for that question.
Thanks.
Okay, let's look at the next chart, which gives you a brief recap of revenues. There are several key sources of revenues, as you know, and once again, we're looking at the 23 budget in the middle versus 22. In terms of the federal grants and reimbursements, you'll see that's up more than $2 million. the lion's share of that increase is related to the additional ESSER funding that we're anticipating for the increased expenses that we talked about on the previous page. Tuition, which generally is in the $2.5 to $3 million range, we anticipate might be down a little bit this year. The actual results for 21 were a little bit lower than we expected, but we are planning some tuition increases in the coming year that might help keep that level year to year, as opposed to a decline of $150,000. But to be conservative and careful, we've shown a possible slight drop. Working capital. This, as you probably recall, has been a return to the taxpayer of accumulated working surplus over many years. We returned some of that surplus through working capital showing up as revenue in 21. We took down another $1 million of the surplus to return to taxpayers in the 22 budget. We have now drawn down that working capital balance to the point where we think we need to maintain working capital and not draw it down any further in 23, which is why you see a zero in that line for 23. Our typical payroll every 2 weeks, for example, runs between 1.3 and 1.4 million. That's just for the salaries. That doesn't include benefits payments. So what we do is we look at, like any person making their own individual budget, you know, what is a month's worth of expenses or 2 months worth of expenses, and what do we want to keep as working capital? So we're there at this point. No further revenues are anticipated at this time. And then special ed and local revenues we're expecting to go up. We're assuming that we'll get some higher reimbursements from the state in terms of special education and support services, although that's an area that we're continuing to look at because there could be changes coming in terms of that funding model due to Act 173, which has been deferred for the last 2 years and could be implemented in the coming year. So that's an area of sensitivity for the budget. So federal and local revenues, excluding anything from the state, is budgeted to be about $25 million, up about $1.25 million. So when you look at that and the fact that, okay, our revenues went up by $1 million plus, that's good news. But offsetting that is the fact that our total expenses went up more. Therefore, the amount remaining to be funded by the state, which was $34 million in the 22 budget, would increase to $36.7 million in the 23 budget, a change of 7% and $2.3 million. I'm going to show you on the next chart how that lines out in a way that might be a little bit more clear. So this chart looks at total top-line expenses and then federal and local revenues and the net remaining amount that has to be funded by the state. I'll talk about the other lines at the bottom of the chart in just a moment. So as you can see, we've already talked about the expenses going up with ESSER by the $3.7 million. The revenues from the federal and local sources going up also, but not by as much. And therefore, we have a difference of $2.4 million, and therefore, the amount we are projecting the AAE would need to fund for us would be almost $37 million. The equalized pupils, as I mentioned, and before I mention the equalized pupils, you'll notice that a number of these numbers are in blue. And the reason why they're in blue is because they are based upon preliminary data from the AOE. We've gotten the first run of equalized pupils, but we're expecting that to change. Last year we got 5 iterations of equalized pupils over the first few months of the calendar year. But hopefully if it stays relatively close, we'll be at 1,970 equalized pupils. So when you divide the $37 million to be funded by the state by that number of equalized pupils, you get 18,624 average dollars per equalized pupil. And again, we don't calculate the equalized pupils. That's done by AOE based upon the metrics that they have, including some metrics like average daily membership that we provide to them, but it's a very complex weighting formula to go from one to the other. Since the equalized pupils are relatively flat, the average cost per pupil does go up this year by the same percentage as the state funding amount, in the 7% range. And as of right now, well, I should say as of a December 1st tax department letter from the state of Vermont, their preliminary estimate is that the average cost per pupil across the entire state will be about $18,000. Up by about 5% year to year, but again, that number's preliminary and it's very likely to change. So let me stop there and ask if there are questions about these estimates. Okay, let's go on to the next chart. Based upon the state mandated budget language and the fact that we are being requested to fill in 3 numbers, and based upon the budget numbers that I've shown you, including the total expenses, then the net equalized pupil and the percentage increase, this is what the proposed ballot language would look like based upon the budget that we have today. And again, we've gone over the other bullet points there. So, I really appreciate your time and your attention at this late hour. And I would be glad to answer any questions that you have and that I can answer.
Okay, are there any questions on the budget?
Allison has her hand up.
Okay, Allison?
So Ted, just to be clear, I know we talked about the revenue coming from the Essa funds. However, I believe the way the ballot language is constructed, we still end up showing an increase because it's based on per pupil, not, so we can't really, in the way that we are required to ask for the funding, show the variation in the ESSER funds. Is that correct?
That's a really great question, and yes, it's my understanding that the way you described it is correct. In fact, last year, my first time through this, I wanted to add to the language. I wanted to add an explanatory note because of some of the things that were going on, like that we were drawing down the working capital surplus. And what I was told was that, no, you have to do the language as it is, no changes, you just fill in the 3 numbers. And of course, the first number has to be the request to the taxpayer for funding this amount of expenditures, irrespective of where they come from. So that's why when you take the $1.8 million of ESSER-funded expenses, we've got that $1.8 million in the 61.6. However, that $1.8 million gets netted out by the revenues when we talk about the net educational spending of $18,006 per pupil and the related 7.4%. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are there questions on the budget? Okay. And I'll ask you to read the ballot language as a motion, please, so we can get that into the minutes.
Sure. The proposed ballot language reads as, shall the voters of Rutland City School District approve the school board to expend $61,649,000, which is the amount the school board determined to be necessary for ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that the proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $18,624 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 7.4% higher than spending for the current year.
Okay. So you want to hear a motion for that?
So moved.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion on the budget? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the budget carries.
Thank you very much for your time, and great thanks to the Finance Committee for their guidance throughout this process.
Thank you, Ted, for all you and your team have done to get to this point.
It's a pleasure. We're glad to assist.
Okay, so we have some reports, the Finance and Planning Committee, the Building Committee report, and the Policy Committee report with first readings that we would need a motion on. Does anybody have any questions on the reports themselves? Okay, so can we have a motion on the policy, the first readings? And that would be Kevin, I believe it's your committee?
Sure. It is my committee. Does anybody have any questions?
Would you like to make a motion then for the first reading?
Can I make that motion, or does someone else have to do that?
You can make that motion.
I would like to move that we approve the policies listed on the agenda for first reading.
Second that motion.
Okay, is there any discussion on that?
I have a discussion.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, I know it's late, but I went through some stuff. I disagree with the order of business of changing old policy to, changing on policy 1540, changing from old business to unfinished business. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, that was based on Robert's Rules of Order. Kathy, can you speak to that?
I see Mr. Bliss agreeing with you on that too.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add, because this is the first reading, you can vote no for first reading, Stephanie, if that's what you want, and then, given that, if the committee wants to make any adjustments for second reading, they can do that, and you can vote yes or no on the second time as well.
Okay.
May I?
And?
Kathy Sosa has her hand up.
Okay, Kathy?
Wait.
Oh, Kathy, I'll be back to you, Stephanie.
I would just like to point out that in Robert's Rules of Order specifically states that they don't want old business to be used. And there's a section that I'm happy to share, not right now, but happy to share where they say specifically that old business should not be used, it should be unfinished business.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Old business and unfinished business are truly two different things. So maybe we should have it separated as to old business and unfinished business, because they really aren't the same thing.
What I would recommend, Stephanie, for you to do would be that can go back to the policy. This is only the first reading. Is there a policy committee meeting coming up, Kevin?
Yes. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but
It's fine, I'll look and yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and go to that. Any other conversation on that?
On that one, no.
Any conversation on any of the others?
Kathy has her hand up.
Okay, Kathy, thank you.
I would just like to say that there's a specific protocol for the agenda that every public board is supposed to follow. So we can bring that up at the next policy meeting. But it's a stated agenda.
Kathy? All right, other questions on the policies?
Can I just clarify what Kathy just meant? Does that mean I can't speak?
No. I'm telling you to go to the policy committee. Is that what you, unless you have further questions?
I have further on different policies, yes. So should I go to the policy committee meeting on what else I have issues with?
That probably would be recommended because this is only the first reading. And we have done that before. That way, Mr. Bliss, you've been involved with policy for a while.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, if I have to go to a policy meeting, what is the point of having us reading having the first reading and not questioning stuff?
It's the first view for the whole board. recommended from.
Exactly, so I should be able to question and not have to go to a meeting because I'm questioning. So, like, I'm asking for guidance as still in my first year as a board member. You're telling me like, in one sentence, go to the board meeting, but then going to the policy committee meeting, but then asking a question. Like, so what's the clarification? Can I ask questions tonight or not?
You can ask questions tonight.
Okay, so then the next one is policy number 3140. I thought we had a separate policy in regards to having a different flag displayed, the non-United States flag and the Vermont state flag, and we are changing in regards to what I see, new language in the flag display. Can I get more clarification on that, please? 1340.
Okay, 3140. Is there a procedure versus policy, Bill? Help me on this one.
So we did develop a procedure, a separate procedure for a separate flagpole that functions as an example, a bulletin board would. And so the new language in this policy maintains the integrity of that second flagpole as well as the first flagpole, which is specifically for the U.S. flag, and you can fly, it's my understanding, the Vermont flag and or the POW flag on that pole.
Kevin, I'm sorry. Yes.
The specific wording for the policy is in the packet.
I had it right here in front of me.
And is there a concern that you have with what we've proposed there?
Well, honestly, at this point, because I have been through this and I do have issues, and I'm not gonna, I will take this up. I will come to your next meeting and bring this all up because I don't want to make this meeting go any further based off me having conversations in regards to different policies. So, I'm respecting us as that.
Are there any other questions on the policies? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the first reading of the policies that Kevin's committee has presented to us, signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, with one opposed. Two opposed. Two opposed, thank you. So just, what's that?
Before we move on to the next item.
And put your hand up for a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann.
It's just before we move on to the next item, I want to return to the building committee report and request that the board chair appoints a committee chair for that committee, please.
I understand the need for that. At a previous meeting, the chair said that she would no longer be chair and asked somebody else to cover. And so now Dan is asking you to follow board policy and have the chair appoint a chair of that committee.
That would be fine. Harley, do you want to do that now?
I can, sure. I will, okay, who's on the committee right now? Please help me. Stephanie and Brittany? And you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I will appoint Stephanie to be chair of that committee then.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you. Other questions? Okay, we're into the Essa spending plan.
Hi, everyone. I'm here.
So, Abby, you can share your screen, or do you want me to?
There we go. I think I just unmuted. So there are going to be two different ways that you can access this information. I'm going to share a presentation with you. So let me know if you can see it. If we're up here. Can you see this presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So because we're in a hybrid format, Rob has some paper copies I had printed out in December. There's slight change to the first slide, but other than that, everything's the same. I didn't want to have to repeat for you. And there's also the Art Esser spending plan. So For those of you who don't know me at home, I'm Abby Brodowski. I am the recovery coordinator for Rutland City Public Schools. And I'm going to be presenting tonight on our ARC ESSA spending plan, which, for those of you who may not remember, ARC ESSA is the third round of ESSA funding. We have 2 other rounds of ESSA funding for a total of about a little over $17 million. If you don't have a paper copy of the plan, I put the tiny URL link into the chat for you, and you can also type it in from the first slide here, which is a little bit different than on the paper, so that you can actually navigate the spending plan itself, which is a long, complicated federal document to tell you how we're planning on spending the third round of ESSA funding, which is about $11.2 million. So it's helpful to note that the plan is a draft plan. It will be submitted to the Vermont Agency of Education by the due date of March 29th. It could change slightly between now and then. Also, we just found out too, the plan will be updated when we make investments into the grant, so it is actually a live document. If you came back in 6 months and looked at this document, which is also posted on the district website, you'll notice that the amounts may change because we're actually supposed to keep the public informed on how we're using the grant itself. Remember, with grant funds like ESSA, revenues must equal expenses, and there's a net zero impact on the education fund. So let's dig into the plan. Quickly, the first section, which starts on page 1, is just general information about the district. And then we have section 2, which is COVID-19 and education recovery information. There are some links. So if you look at this in the digital format, and you look at the plan in the digital format, you can actually click on this to get more information. Then in section 3, we have COVID federal emergency funding, and this is our total amount of grant allotment for all 3 rounds of ESSA, plus a few other grants that we use in the district. And just a brief explanation of how those funds are used. And so I'm kind of moving quickly through those first 3 sections because they're not particularly large, and because section 4 is actually the meat of the document and where you want to pay the most attention if you want to know how the money is being used. So as we get into section 4, we are on page 3 of the document. And you will see that first in part 1, we have COVID prevention and mitigation strategies. So there's a long list in part 1 of all of the different strategies we are using to work on the issue of COVID recovery. And those areas in part 1 are actually going to be repeated in parts 2 and 3. So if you turn or scroll down to the plan onto page 5, you will actually see the same items with more detail. So it's important to note that in that part 1 of section 4, those are repeated again later, and they give you more information. So let's focus on part 3. So we're at page 5, and these are the evidence-based strategies to address academic impact of lost instructional time. We are required in the third round of funding to reserve 20% of the $11 million for impact of lost instructional time for students. And in our plan, we're actually going to be using about $3.5 million, which is more than 20% of the amount that is required for us to do. In order for you to understand, instead of giving you like this very long list of ways that we are hoping to spend the money, I broke it down into 4 different categories. And those are listed for you, and then you can read underneath each of the different positions or the different projects that we're hoping to work on. So we have relationship building and social emotional learning, summer after school and extended support programming, transitions, outreach, and community partnerships, and flexible pathways for learning. So the remaining 80% of the grant, that's on page 7 of the spending plan. We are allowed to spend about $9 million. We are spending about $7.7 million, which is a little bit lower than what we are allowed to spend, and that's, again, because we're spending a little bit more on the direct loss of instructional time. So in those areas, we have some sections that I set up for you to help you understand. We've got professional development and multi-tiered systems of support. We have curriculum, we have technology, recovery and strategic planning, and construction and maintenance. You'll see some big numbers, especially in construction and maintenance, and ways that we hope to keep our schools safe and healthy in their operations. And these items are put together by our recovery team. They are based on our recovery training from last spring, and our building leaders are frequently coming forward with different proposals and ideas about how we can spend this money in the best possible way to impact students in a positive manner. And as we get into the last part of our document, which actually starts on page 10, I will mention that the section 5 is a plan for meaningful consultation and stakeholder engagement. So we have a list at the top of that section 5 of a bunch of data that I gathered through meaningful stakeholder engagement surveys that we did, and we went to open houses, we did a lot of activities to figure out what people felt about the way we were hoping to spend the money. And there are stakeholder groups and outcome and feedback provided, and this is a requirement for us to be able to spend the money. So when we go in and we actually ask for investment from the government, we have to, for our ESSER, show that we have gone out into the public and asked an open ask. So there's a ton of information there. We thought it was better to give you more than to little, but it is a lot, so if you have questions, you're always welcome to ask me. And just a couple of helpful hints. Remember in section 4, if you're going through those COVID-19 prevention strategies are going to be repeated in 20% and 80% breakdowns. We have 4 pillars of ESSER grant funding. It's the 3 social emotional learning, academic achievement, and engagement and truancy, plus safe and healthy operations, which is where a lot of the construction projects lie. In the section 5, there's the data available to you to dig into with the outcome summaries provided for each target group. So I know it's late, I wanted to give you as quick an overview as possible, but I'm happy to answer questions related to the plan and what that means you have at this point. I will stop.
Does anybody have any questions for Abby? Are you good there?
Yeah.
I'm wonderful. I'm at home. I'm figured out.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Last item on the agenda is the item that was added. Trish is the one who requested it to add, so I will turn it over to her right now.
Okay. So, I will just point out that when the voters went to the polls, they did speak loud and clear as far as what they wanted. And also, as we know, the community, the children and whatnot have also spoken. So, I do have a motion. So I would like to discontinue the use of the Ravens moniker and adopt the Raiders moniker, effective immediately.
Is there a second? Okay, Stephanie seconded. All right. Is there a debate? Okay, Kevin? And Mr. Bliss, it's just because I can see Kevin, so you need to let me know. Those hands are going up.
Kathy after Kevin.
Okay, Kevin?
Okay.
You're muted, Kevin.
Kevin, you're muted.
This is a bad idea for many reasons. If you'll recall, the reason that we decided to stop using the Raider name was because a group came to us that represented current and former students, community members. It was a large group of people that pointed out that the Raider name has a long history of being associated with negative stereotypes of Native American people, and there was acknowledgement that the Red Raiders, especially, I believe, Hurley, you were quoted in the paper saying that the Red Raiders was clearly a racist name. So the history of racism associated with Raiders is pretty well documented. The fact that students reported to us that they felt offended and unwelcomed by that name is also pretty significant, and that was the motivation. We wanted to make sure that our students felt welcomed in our school. And so that's why we voted to stop using the Raider name. To go back to the Raider name is to tell those students that we don't really care what you think. And that's a really bad thing for a school board to be saying. Because we should be making all of our students feel welcomed in our schools. Every student, every day, is on just about everything this district puts out. And to ignore what our minority students feel about our mascot and about how welcome they feel in our school, to ignore that that's just really bad policy. Okay, there's also, I'm trying to be brief here, there's also the community situation. We in Vermont have an aging and decreasing population. In order for us to survive economically, we need to attract people to Vermont and specifically to Rutland. If we make this change and become the community that went back to a racist mascot, that's a very unwelcoming message to not only minority folks, but progressive thinkers everywhere, which is the kind of folks that we want to have moving to our community. So it's really a bad move for the future of our community to go. I mean, I know that people are very attached to that name, but its history is really negative. And for us to go back to that name after it's been pointed out how unwelcoming it is a really bad decision. And I also wonder whether it's something that could put us in a position of being open to a lawsuit. This is a school board making a conscious decision to shift back to a name that has already been identified as being unwelcoming to students. That's a huge liability. For all of those reasons, I think this is a bad idea and we should not do it. That's all.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Rob, you had other people in there.
Kathy was next.
Kathy?
Thank you. What I hear the reason for for going back to the Raiders is that it's tradition, and that folks don't want to change. And the world is changing, and you can see that all around us with other schools that are changing their mascots, and national teams with millions of dollars invested in their branding are changing. Ski resorts are changing their names. So the world is changing, and now that we know this is a bad thing to do, we need to do better. We can do better. And I know it's hard. Whenever our country has looked into making a big change, there's been resistance, it's been painful, but we need to do this. We need to change to a non-racist mascot. We need to stay the Ravens. School needs to be a safe place for all of our kids. I know it's a very small group of people that this affects, but that's exactly the reason why we need to change it. What would we say to the small number of students? We don't care. We don't care that this is offensive and we're marginalizing you. I don't want to do that, and I really don't think anyone on the board does either. But that's what the old mascot does. And I also know that the VSBA is encouraging all schools that have said not to have racist mascots, so we should follow their advice as a school board. And I also believe that there's legislation being introduced on the floor this session that will ban Indigenous-related mascots. So we could end up just having to change back again. And then lastly, I mean, this really should have been warned. It feels like it regardless of whether you think there needs to be a motion to rescind or not, it shouldn't be done on the fly. And I think Robert's rules and our policies would support that. So thank you.
So you had Stephanie on the screen, then you had Charlene here, and then Allison here.
I have a point of order.
Yep.
So, This motion is an improper motion because it conflicts with a previously adopted motion of the board. So the board would need...
Anything you can do, Allison, to disrupt this whole process?
Stephanie, please.
I have a point of order.
Stephanie, please. Stephanie, please. Allison, please continue.
So the point of order is that it's an improper motion because it conflicts with the previously adopted motion of the board. You cannot just make another motion.
I think I'll overrule that because I think we have in the past when we've had a motion on the floor and we've had a motion done for other things, we did have a motion that changed it. And I will just rely upon that, and if you feel that it was done, and we can always get it, once we get a parliamentarian in here, we can look at it at that point. But I will say that, I will say the motion will go through right now. Okay, and now...
So actually, I would like to test the rule of the chair and suggest that maybe you look in Robert's Rules of Order to base that after we had 9 months and $3,000 reviewing meetings that were held prior. I think it would only be prudent to review that this is done correctly.
So are you looking at contesting my ruling that would require a vote? And that, I believe, is non-debatable, Aaron? The vote contesting my ruling, is it non-debatable, and is it a vote that has to occur?
Quite honestly, someone else would probably be able to answer that more quickly than I would, but I can
whip out my vote here and what I have.
Certainly I can find.
Okay.
So she's contesting your ruling of point of order. Is this what we're looking at?
Yeah, she's contesting my ruling. And
so I'm going to believe it's not a conflict because the previously passed motion did not include the current board members.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the contesting of the motion. Okay.
So basically, point of order.
Yep.
A motion that she's bringing in versus the rules of order contact must be addressed immediately by the chair, who is subsequent order. The chair rectify the situation always in order. So there's no vote. The chair has the call.
But
I know next and used to challenge, so it's a majority vote that would rule the contention.
Okay, so we would have, now when it says that, is it a debatable majority vote?
I don't see that part on here. Debatable majority vote. No, it doesn't say. It just says, if you're going to appeal the decision of the chair, it's a majority vote.
Okay.
The conflict was the previous board, not the current board.
True, and was this under new business this time, which it was under unfinished last time, so there's never going to be a good place to do it, so I suggest...
Unfinished last time is not accurate?
No, Stephanie, please, it could go either way.
I agree,
under various people's definitions of a word or a meaning of any one thing. So, having said that, this could be under any agenda item, and I suggest we have the vote now. If there is,
so why don't we let the various board members speak like we let Allison and Quinn speak?
I'm giving it back to Hurley.
Okay, my ruling was, and I'm looking at it here, the vote on the ruling by the chair, I appeal the decision. Is there a second to that appeal? That's what I have to look for.
I second that appeal.
Kathy seconds it.
Okay. Thank you. And now, that is debatable. So there is any debatable on that, and it's simple majority. Okay?
Kathy Salsa has her hand up.
Okay, Kathy.
Thank you. On page 326, section 39.5, It says likewise, apart from motions to rescind or to amend something previously adopted, motions are not in order if they conflict with one or more motions previously adopted at any time and still in force. That would say that it's an improper motion.
Speak up.
Charlene has her hand up.
Okay, Charlene?
So,
And Stephanie. Okay, and it's just on, the debate is only on my ruling.
Okay, so can you tell me, what are we doing here? Let's take a vote for this debate. Is that what we need to do?
We are debating on Kathy's motion that she disagreed with my decision about allowing the vote.
So do you want a roll call? Is that what we're asking for now?
No, she gave her information. We are debating it right now, if it was proper or not. And if you have information that says that is my ruling was okay, that's the time to share it versus if Kathy gave us the ruling.
I can tell you that we don't all have our Robert's Rules books here in front of us, so it sounds to me like we're going to have to go to a vote.
Yeah, there was a motion, the second, and now it's discussion.
Okay, Stephanie? And again, it's just on the motion that it was not, my ruling was not proper.
That wasn't what I wanted to speak on, it was before that, so I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay? Does anybody else have any debate on my ruling?
Trish, did you want to say something about it, or was that?
I do not have a specific debate on the ruling. However, the thing that has really caught us in the past is we can go ahead with the vote in my...
Trish, I'm going to stop you there because right now this debate is purely on the ruling.
Sorry.
Okay?
Yep.
I apologize, but this debate's purely on the ruling. Okay? So it's purely on the ruling.
Which I understand that, but the fact is you let Kevin and Allison say what they needed to say.
We're going to go back to that. We'll go back to the debating the question. There was a point of order. I addressed the point of order, and the point of order was said to me then when I made my ruling on the point of order.
Okay.
She has the right to immediately appeal and can interrupt. This is purely on the point of order and my ruling on that question, okay? This is all we're going to vote on right now, and then we will debate the question if the vote allows it. Is there any more debate on the ruling that I made? Okay, Aaron, roll call, please.
Would you call the question clearly, please?
Are you calling the question?
I'm asking the chair to call the question clearly and
I will
repeat
call
it,
the
please.
question because there's no more debate.
Okay.
Can you state the question, please, so that it's clear for everyone?
If I understand what Ann wants correctly, is that we are voting on whether or not Hurley's ruling for Allison's point of order should go forward or not, correct?
If my ruling was wrong, is what we're doing.
Okay.
So it's a yes or no question, was Hurley's ruling wrong? Am I understanding correctly?
Well, no, there has to be a clear, Kathy, why don't you make a motion, or Allison, would you do it?
I made a point of order that the motion on the floor is an improper motion. And Kathy read the section in Robert's Rules to show that it is.
First Hurley, you made a point of order. Hurley gave it.
Allison, you don't tell the rules, and according to Robert's rules,
contested it.
He could contest my ruling. And then we debated that.
Okay, so here's the question. Do we agree with Allison that Hurley's ruling should be contested?
I think that's a double negative, and that might not be a good way to word it.
Do we agree that my ruling was wrong?
The question should be, do you support Hurley's ruling or not?
Correct.
So a yes vote
Thank you.
supports Pearlie's ruling. A no vote does not.
Yeah, I think that's the opposite, because the motion on the floor is contesting my ruling.
Yes.
So if we say yes, it's pretty bad. If we say yes, then we are agreeing with Kathy that my ruling was flawed. Am I correct? Do we all understand that?
No.
No.
I think we need to either agree with your point of order, Hurley, or not. I think Rob is right for simplicity, because again, it's a reverse vote if otherwise. Like Allison said, it's two edges.
Yes.
So do we agree with Hurley's, with the chair's ruling? On point of order.
Roll call.
Okay. Everyone okay with that question? Do we agree with the chair's ruling on the point of order? Anne?
No.
No? Was that a no?
That was a no.
No.
Brittany?
Yes.
Charlene?
Yes.
Tina?
No.
Kevin?
No.
Tricia?
Yes.
Kathy?
No.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Aaron, yes. So that's a tie.
So I break the tie.
Yes.
And I will vote that my ruling was okay. I will say yes.
Okay. 6-5 in favor of Hurley's ruling.
Now we can get back to debating the question. And Stephanie, you had your hand up about debating the question, about going back to Raiders from Ravens. Stephanie, you're up.
So July of 2020, this situation started in regards to the negative effect that the Raider name and the Arrowhead logo had on our students and our community. Since then, there has been a lot of interactions and whatnot. And the combination of the two is what I feel, as I have seen, is the general theme of what is negative and racist. If you separate them, is that the answer? And in that time of all of the combination, the students have been neglected. And you want to say there is the side. It's one side or the other. So at this point, I'm going for the simplest of tonight. It's going to be the Raven side and the Raider side. The Raven side, the non-Raiders have said it's racist and it is affecting our students. It's, it's harmful. What about the students who want to keep the Raiders? What about the students who think the Ravens are harmful? Why are those students being silenced? In the end, why is either side being silenced? Why are we not coming together? Back when Kevin put his original motion out, when Aaron and Charlene tried to do friendly amendments and everything else involving them, why, as a board, the previous board, nothing to do with myself and Tricia at that point, could you guys, as a group, not come together for the better of our students? You all talk about the students, including myself, and I know we as individuals do lots to work and do everything for these students, whether the general public realizes it or not, but we do. Why, as a group, could you not come together to come up with something? You were ignorant and not wanting to say, you know what, let's compromise. And I go back to that previous board and certain members of that board. It makes me angry. I, as a parent, as a senior and a sophomore, as a parent who has coached several of students in this particular sport, I live these students go to a Rutland football game on a Friday night. Those student body are not saying Ravens. They are saying Raiders. You want to say where our student body lies? Our student body does not lie in Ravens. They want to be Raiders. Nobody is talking about the symbol. We say mascot. People want to say the word mascot. A symbol of their arrowhead is not a mascot. We do not have a mascot. We have a symbol, which most of people, and including some on this board, because I sat in a board meeting and an ad hoc committee meeting, who did not know how the arrowhead came to be a part of Rutland High School and the RCPS community. It was a contest held by Mike Norman when he first came to Rutland High School. And a student who is not a student who is not part, I'm trying to pick my right word. It was a student of non-white ethnicity that won this contest. So yet, we go back to it's being racist, this and everything else. In the end, you're going to call out a student who was the winner of this contest, a contest that everybody in the RCPS was allowed to submit. The one thing I have not heard from all of this, the previous board of the last election and this board, and something I have pushed for, have a conversation with me, and I can guarantee you, I will say it. Where's the education in regards to this issue to our students? Everybody wants to talk about this side and that, this side and that side. Where are we talking about? Let's educate our students. Let's have conversations. Let's look at the curriculum of what is actually being talked about in regards to Indigenous people. Let's talk about the other issues that have happened in our district in the last 2 years. Black Lives Matter was a major issue in our district. What did that do? It made us spread further apart. And now this issue. Let's talk about the education of these two things, not just have it be a bunch of adults arguing. Let's make it to be the education of the students, whether it's ESP, in the curriculum. There's plenty of other ways we can make this happen. Let's do it. You want to talk about compromise, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. In the beginning of this, we didn't know the extent of what COVID was going to have on the ramification of our district. But since then, we do. And as somebody who's been sitting in the Staff Relations Committee and working on these negotiations with other fellow board members, it is beyond disheartening that others are trying to push something. There needs to be a compromise. We are adults. Compromise. Go back to the friendly amendment that Aaron and Charlene tried to do, that Kevin would not accept. And I can see some, I'm gonna end because honestly at this point I can see some faces of my fellow board members and I'm gonna choose to stop talking.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off, Stephanie, but
you did not. It was actually the face of somebody else that cut me off.
Yeah, Charlene and then
okay, Charlene.
And Dina.
Okay, sorry Dina, I didn't see you. Charlene, you're up.
Thank you. Kevin and Kathy, you have good points, and I respect your opinion. And coming from a different angle with this, as far as we've been talking about this for so long, because there's a majority of the people on the board that want to have a vote, okay? And it has been going on for this long because of the semantics of the Roberts rules. And it's suppressing the majority vote, okay? And those of you who are against this going forward, this process right now, are big advocates for transparency, equity, inclusion. And I don't believe it. I think this is the complete opposite of transparency, equity, and inclusion, because I'm going to speak on behalf of the majority of the board. We're not going home at night and reading parliamentary law, okay? That's just not happening. And because of the semantics of Robert's rules, we are not getting anything done. Okay, I work for the, I represent the community. I represent the people that put me on the ballot. And the majority of this board wants to have their vote. It's as simple as that. And in March, the entire community will have their vote and have their voices be heard, because they can put people in the school board positions that they see are aligned with what they think. What I'm asking, what I'm respectfully asking the chair is to listen, let the majority of the board have their vote and push this process forward and move on.
Thank you. And Mr. Bliss, what did you say?
So you got Kevin, then Dina, then Ann.
Okay, Kevin, Dina, and then Ann. Kevin?
Just briefly, Stephanie, I know that this process actually began a long time ago, like at least 15 years ago, when there was a group of, from what I've told, Kathy Archer, her daughter was a part of the group that brought it up to the board. Possibly, I don't know if the board took action at that time, but I think it was the superintendent at that time that made the change. There was a group of students back then, this is the early 2000s, that said that the Red Raiders was a racist name and it needed to be changed. And the change was made to drop the word red, and the change was made to stop using the image of a Native American in a headdress and to go to the arrowhead. So there was a compromise made back then, and 15 years later, students were still feeling offended, which is why we made the change. And the education piece, you're right, we should be doing that, and we are. Actually, Patty Beaumont presented to this board about things that they were doing in the middle school about teaching awareness of the experience of racial minorities in our schools.
Mia Schultz coming in as the NAACP does not constitute us coming
Kevin has
together.
the floor. Stephanie, Kevin has the floor, please. Thank you.
So there is an educational piece happening, and I think it's a good thing, because there's a majority of people on this board that don't recognize the issues that we think are really important, and that's a big concern for me. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Bliss, you are keeping my order.
Yep, you got Dina and then Ann.
Okay,
Stephanie's
Dina.
got a minute after that.
Okay. Dina?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just two major parts of this for me. You've heard me speak of this before in previous board meetings, so I'm trying not to rehash what has been happening for the past year, but just to point out and kind of speak my piece before the March transition. There's some context here that we have to identify, and as we talk about meme, and let's just call it imagery, you know, the imagery that has been associated with our history has created a certain context. And that certain context is what we are debating, not the word of this or the word of that. It's historical context that has been moved through our district as representation of our whole district. It's not just a representation of the athletic teams or this and that. It's a representation of us as a whole district, as a public school
type of representation. So I understand that people have high identification with the name and whatever personal history and interaction with the name and the imagery, and that's completely understandable, and nobody's trying to take that away. All that is said is that looking at the context that's been built over the years, we have been, not intentionally, but we have been not taking into account some minority voices, whether they're in the school board, on the school board agenda or not, they are still in our community. Whether items make it to the school board or not, they are still in our community. So I really would like to ask the board that as we move forward with all of our educational curriculum, inclusivity, equity type of efforts, I really would like us to recognize that part of it is identifying that sometimes we need to make changes that do not affect us directly, that do not have impact to our lives directly, however have impact to other people's situation and experience in our community, those that they cannot change. They can. I'm talking about issues that are not something that you can switch a shirt and be something else. You cannot rewrite a name and be something else. When somebody has an experience in the community, they are based on who they are, where they're from, how they speak, what background they have, whatever representation they have that has not been the majority experience. How do we address that? How does our board take on minority-based issues as a majority-based voting? How do we do that? If something as a request to change the wording of our representation or the wording of our imagery, and as we can all agree on, I think that images do matter and they are part of our curriculum, how do we take that historical context and repurpose it, rebrand it, without taking any consideration the still ongoing experience of the people on the ground that may not be us? And that's the question I would like to have to the remaining of the board. And everybody has their opinion, everybody has their experience, everybody will vote their conscience, and that's what we do here. We vote what we think is the right thing at the time. And I respect that. I just want to put that out there. Majority voting does not necessarily address minority issues that will be still ongoing. Whether you decide on it or not, they will still be ongoing. So I just want to have people have that perspective. I want to go back to Isabella's representation of our mission statement, and thank you for mentioning that. Our mission statement has value and it resonates beyond our school, into our community, through our state, through everything. Can we look at that mission statement and say, yes, this within the historical context that we've created as humans, does this represent us as a public school at this current time? That's really the question. Secondly, procedurally, unfortunately, the motion was voted on last year, correct? Yes, everybody can agree on that. This is one motion in the school board history that I know that have lingered around in mid-air and has never been taken into actual execution because we've developed all this procedural stuff. And to Charlene's point, we've sat together on the ad hoc committee that was appointed whenever it was in the summer. And we've looked at all the procedural stuff. We've never done that before. We've never picked out motions and broke them apart. We've done that here, and I supported that effort, side or no side. I supported that effort, and going through it, we got a clear understanding of it and moved forward from it. But we've opened the door now. We have opened the door where we do need to understand what we're doing. We do need to understand the rules because we've created a precedence now of, so if somebody doesn't like the vote, we can create a whole procedural effort for 9 months to pick a motion apart, get to a conclusion, and still not have anything that has been put in place to address that motion. So what's the end game here? Like, so a new board comes in March, what's the end game? And please, I need to understand, as I become a civilian community member in March, how does this board attend to address minority-based issues if all we can account to is a majority-based understanding?
Or how many of the board members have actually went in and spoken to the students?
Dina has the floor. Thank you.
I'm not into argument. I respect your opinion and I respect your perspective. We may disagree on it. I speak to plenty of students.
I asked a question.
Well, Stephanie, please, Dina has the floor. And to address all questions to me, she has the floor, and then I believe Rob has said that Ann has the next floor. Okay? All right.
Were you finished,
You
Ann?
just have to follow protocol. Okay.
I'm not going to get into the back and forth. There's been a lot that has gone down this year that has been questionable, and we can identify those things. I am not interested in rehashing this. I need to understand what is the plan here, what are we trying to affect, and to maybe voice my opinion that this has consequences beyond what can be represented as a majority-based vote. That's all I'm saying. So everybody, obviously, we're individuals that vote. You vote your conscience. We look at ourselves in the mirror at the end of the day, not at each other. So we each have our opinion. I'm not going to go back and forth and argue across the board virtual room on things that we know that we are not seeing the same way. All I'm trying to do is present a lens from which we can maybe look at things in a way that's not just the words or what we've lost and what we've gained, but more of an overview, a vision-based approach going forward. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Ann? Am I correct, Mr. Bliss?
Yes, you have Ann, then Stephanie had her hand up again, and then you have Isabella.
Okay.
Thank you. I also represent the community. I was voted in as well. I agree the work of the board, the true work of the board has been dragging along because of this issue. This board, following on what Dina has said, this board agreed to use Robert's Rules of Order to run its meetings. It's a procedural guide. It's not statute, but we agreed to use it. It's not semantics. It's, and maybe some people stay up all night reading it. It's something that we as a board agreed to run our meetings, and we need a lot of help running our meetings. You can't pick, like Dina said, you can't pick and choose when you want to use it, when it's going to impede what you want. We're using it and we need the guidance. Some board members accuse others of not following procedure. We had a whole thing. We were talking about the mascot. I spent countless hours with you guys in that committee, and we got our result, and it was done. Bringing this issue up in so-called new business is improper, and I ask, should we throw out the budget vote that we just voted upon? We'll vote next week because maybe we'll change our mind. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Bliss, who is next?
You had Stephanie and then Isabella.
Okay. And then we should be talking about wrapping it up and make sure at least everyone has one voice. If they wanted their voice heard, they would have it already. Stephanie?
So as I've listened to a few of my board members talk, and I'm trying to piece them together, in the end, how many of you board members can say you have actually went into the high school or had conversations with the current student body? You want to say we're...
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah.
You want... This process has been flawed from the start. From the very night
that Kevin put the motion out on that board, where Aaron and Charlene, both of them in different wording, tried to get a friendly amendment, a compromise, whatever word you want to use. You disagreed as a board and wouldn't let it pass through. There was no such thing as a compromise from this board from day one. And what then, in turn, a member of the administration threatening to suspend a student for trying to do a petition at the school, because that member of the administration knew exactly where that petition was going to go, because in 20 minutes, 100 signatures to keep the Raider name. To continue to say that the student had a voice from the beginning was flawed and wrong. The only time the students had a voice was the very first time they were able to vote on. And every single time in the next votes, so the vote number 2 and number 3, were beyond flawed, because the amount of students that were able to vote continued to get greater and greater. You're going to tell me you're going to allow 3rd graders to vote on this issue, and in reality, do they really know the issue? No, they don't. Administration, and more so, I say administration, but I'm really directing it at one person, skewed it. 100%. It was skewed to get the votes you wanted from the student body. In reality, at this point in time, we should be rescinding, going back to the Raider name and doing a real vote of the student body. Let the student body be the ones and the community, because in the end, it's the taxpayers who voted us all in, every single one of us, all 11 of us as board members. Myself, will I say I was voted in because of this issue? It was part of it. But while what you don't see as a public, I have done much more than this issue. Bottom line is this. It goes back to education. We as a group are not educating and pushing. Somebody raise their hand and tell me that they are pushing or teaching our students, not just high school students, but K through 12, about Indigenous people, about other races, other nationalities, all of the above. These issues are what divide our communities. Why are we not pushing to teach our children? And if we are pushing to teach our children, then why are we not hearing about it? Why are we not hearing about the issues that are dividing our community? And you as a group, who I can see on my screen, please, don't tell me these issues are not dividing our community. It's actually disgusting. As a board member, sitting here at times, I shouldn't say disgusting, I should say disheartening. I've used that term so much over the last couple months. I love my time on the board, but I have to tell you, the actions of few are so disheartening, and it ruins and it gives a bad reputation to all of us. So I ask as a board to step up, put your personal stuff aside, and look at these students, which is in the end what we are all here for. We can compromise, we can come together, but at this point in time, our community is now divided again. And has been divided now, we are almost to the second full year of this division over one topic. step up, do what we need to do, let's compromise, figure out a way to educate, and move on. And in the end, it goes back to you, Kevin, from the very beginning, with your motion that was put out.
Make sure you address your comments to me, that's all, thank you.
No, I'm not addressing, I'm just saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The original, it goes back to Kevin, with the original motion that was put on the screen, that was the wrong one, which does nothing to show that the previous board, not all members, that certain members, and I have, because it was requested in email confirmation that the previous board, previous members of the previous board, in collusion, did behind the scenes work, including members of the current administration. Feel free to deny it, I have the proof. So at this point in time, all I'm asking is let's work together, and no way are we going to agree on this issue. We are a very divided board, and I believe this is what divides us the most, and it's time to move on from this issue.
Okay, thank you. Isabella?
Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak, since I was elected by the student body, just not grade though. This is
just so you can.
I'm a senior this year.
Okay, thank you, Isabella.
Yeah, and I've gone to Rutland High School since kindergarten, or well, Rutland School since kindergarten. So I know the students that I'm with pretty well. I think that's why they elected me. This has been an issue since I began on the board, which was the end of my sophomore year, just those last summer meetings. And I like to say that I'm proud that I have a very diverse group of friends and peers, and I think that maybe saying that the Rutland students are more in favor of Raiders is a biased view of that, because I know quite a lot of people in quite a lot of different circles that would say that, first of all, they just want it to be over, and second of all, they understand where we're coming from with the point that it is, at this point, racist and dividing us. And it's hard to watch our board not be able to conduct themselves in a way that will get this passed. I don't think that there's any sort of compromise we can make when it comes to a topic like this. When I heard people talking about Mr. Kefauver should have taken compromises, and I don't think that's something he could have done morally. And I just really want to say that from the student body, from the people who have elected me, I think it's time for this to be over. I think we need to implement, like Mrs. Doobie was saying, education, the actual changing of things. I've already seen a few changes in our schools. I think that needs to continue in order to reassure the students that the Ravens is a good choice. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Okay, and at this point, because of the late hour, I'd like to just go around for those people who have not had a chance to address the board, to see if they have comments to address the board, and then I think we should be wrapping it up for some sort of vote at that time, so everyone has a voice. So, Mr. Bliss,
yes.
Because I'm not in that room.
You had Allison, who hadn't had a shot on this one yet.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the discussion to change the mascot and the moniker was properly brought before the board by students and alumni 18 months ago. Since I was chair at the time, I have been vilified and attacked by board members and others outside the board for running procedurally correct and fair meetings. Since the board voted 6-4 to retire the mascot, I did not get a vote. Now the board is more closely divided, and the current chair, as a swing vote, has been playing with the issue for months. The agenda item could have been warned appropriately any time since last April. We spent thousands of dollars on an attorney and board training, all of which supported the past actions of the board. Yet because some board members cannot recognize the importance of supporting growing diversity in our schools and community, here we are, still debating the issue. The board voted over a year ago to retire the Raiders name and Arrowhead 11 months ago. We adopted an inclusive mascot moniker, the Ravens. No one has been harmed, no one's achievements have been taken away, and no new information has come before the board to warrant revisiting the binding vote. Ravens hasn't been properly executed, thus hampering students' engagement. While some high school students may be conflicted, look to how the younger grades have identified with it. The Raider moniker and Arrowhead logo have decades of history and use in Rutland City Public Schools, tied to cultural appropriation and characterization of Native Americans. The use is not in line with our vision statement, organizational values, or Vermont Principals Association guidance. A moniker is a nickname, and a mascot is something that symbolizes an organization. Raiders does not support cultural diversity or project a positive, welcoming environment. Our motto of every student, every day includes the less than 1% Native American student population. Our city and our schools are becoming more ethnically and culturally diverse. As a Board of Education, we should see, recognize, and support marginalized populations. People are not mascots. Majority rule has an obligation to protect minority rights.
Yeah, Trish is the last one with her hand up on the board. There's
Okay.
one person in the audience with their hands up, but.
All right, I'm going to keep this really brief because I think we all need to make a decision, which has been long overdue. And there's really not much more. Excuse me?
On the screen too, Rob.
Oh. So to what Dana, you had mentioned about the changing over the years from the Red Raiders to the Raiders and whatnot. I have to tell you, I believe in evolution. So we have evolved the logo, which some people thought the Red Raiders was racist. I'm going to disagree with that. But that's not a debate I'm into tonight. But basically, that was changed and we became the Raiders. What we can actually choose to focus on is that we've made modifications over the years based on people's perceptions, okay? And so we can be evolving and educating as we're going, not eliminating. And back to what our student rep had mentioned, I'm very, very fearful for the generation that we are starting to have moving forward. As I have always preached to my children, 2 of them who are in the school system, you can choose to be offended by something. I've heard the common saying, well, if one person's offended, well, if one person is offended and we're going to go on that base for how we make our everyday decisions, we're never going to have anything with any continuity. Anybody can be offended by anything. It's how you choose to live your life. If you're looking to be offended, I can guarantee something's going to offend you. And that is not a way that we can operate in this time. I mean, it's time to learn to compromise, as Stephanie has said, and everybody needs to learn to work better together, but to have that perception that because you're offended, there has to be something wrong is not necessarily okay. I mean, you can choose for yourself to be offended, but it's better to have a conversation and see different perspectives, because there's always a reason that somebody might look at something differently, and to call somebody racist or discriminatory is nothing short of suppressing people in their voices. So that being said, I'm here for the student community, and I'm also here for the taxpayers. I'm working for the taxpayers. I'm not here to address national issues.
Okay, thank you. Aaron and Brittany were the 2 online that have not spoken. We're going to go through and wrap this up. And then
There's a couple of people in the audience with their hand up. In the event when you're done with the board, if you want to take public comment and allow that.
Okay, I will take brief public comment after this. We'll make it like a 1-minute statement, because we do need to move on. Okay, Aaron? Nothing? Okay, Brittany?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Bliss?
Yeah, let me just get over to my little handy-dandy computer again.
Can I make just a quick important comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
While they're getting settled, it will be short. I just want to respond to one really important thing because I think this is a crucial item, and you will not hear from me again for a while after this. So, I usually do not respond specifically to other board members' specific comments.
Remember, you have to address it to me.
To you, yeah, I'm saying that I usually do not even try to pick up on stuff and readdress it. However, in this specific moment, I have to, because it is super important for me to voice the concern of what I just heard, because experience that people have in the community are not choices necessarily. I do not choose to get offended, and truthfully, I do not share with the public or even with my friends sometimes events that have happened to personal events to myself or my household or my family because of attitudes like of disbelief, dismissal, or representing it as if it is something that we chose to have a perception on or recognition that this has happened. No. These experiences, if we do not believe people that they're having situations that are not favorable because of who they are, by the basic representation of them, we will never be able to move forward with any of our equity, inclusion, and curriculum and education and all the wonderful words that have been voiced here today. Because I will tell you, I do not get offended. However, there have been experiences in this community for people of different type of backgrounds that have been harmful. So this is not a choice. It will never be a choice. We can choose not to accept it. We can choose to ignore it. We can choose to dismiss it. However, those experiences will continue to occur. Whether you're part of it or not, it will continue to occur. Our part as a board is to recognize the fullness and the wholeness of our community and own it as our wholeness, and not just pick and choose what we want and call it education and curriculum because it fits our needs and represent our part of it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the audience.
So you have Sharon again, just speaking.
No, Karen Bossy.
Karen, I'm sorry.
Okay. I just want to say that, once again, this board has amazed or disappointed myself as a taxpayer, and I'm sure many other taxpayers, in the fact that all we have done is rehashed old history, old animosity, and continued with it. The question is, should the ravens be eliminated, for which to me is a bad connotation. A raven means death. Is it death of our team or death of the other team? I mean, I think that's pretty strong language. But aside from that, we can't even agree to put a question on here. And Robert's Rules of Order is used by almost every board. But no board that I have ever sat on or ever witnessed sits there and challenges every time someone wants to say something. And by saying that because something was decided upon, it can never be brought up again is absolutely ludicrous. The board would never change anything. No board would ever change anything. And I've been just told that I have 10 seconds when everybody else, I understand, is a board member, has had hours to restate the same thing. But
told me a minute. I'm sorry.
Mr. Bliss, you can give her
It's up to you. I'm just doing what I'm told.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that I have lost my train of thought by being interrupted, I do want to say that whether you agree with the issue or not, the way that this issue has been handled by this board, people say it wasn't warned, so we can't discuss it tonight. Well, I was at the last meeting. It was warned. It was going to be on the agenda for the January 11th meeting. We were going to go forward with it. And once again, we have sat here for hours and debated whether we're going to go forward. People want to put the issue to rest, then hold the vote and stop being afraid of the outcome of the vote. You're here for the taxpayers, not for your personal opinions. And that's what I feel like is coming in here, is your personal beliefs, your personal opinions. Majority rules, unfortunately, is the way of the world. I don't always agree with who's elected into public office, but a majority of people elected them. I have to live with the consequences. Yes, I think we can be more inclusive, but everybody has experiences in their life that causes emotional problems or that have different connotations or meanings to them. And that's unfortunate, and we can be sympathetic and we can learn from them. But that doesn't mean the whole world changes because of a minority of people. And this doesn't just impact the student body that is there now. Many of these kids are going to graduate and leave Rutland and not ever come back. Again, your taxpayers are the ones that are here, that have stayed here for many years, most of them. Thank you.
And thank you. And there was one more, Mr. Bliss.
Yep.
I'll be very quick.
Just make sure you state your name, please.
My name is Heather. I just want to take a minute to say I've heard over and over and over again about inclusion and being considerate of the minorities all night long from so many board members. No one has mentioned or even brought up those who have Native American culture, those who are indigenous. No one cares about that. Right now, from sitting in the audience, I didn't even come here about Raiders tonight, but I'm seeing everyone's personal agendas lined out. We're not even considerate of the people who respect and are proud of the Raider name and logo. What about those minorities? Ms. Note said only 1% of the population. That's a minority, and we need to not cancel them. We need to listen to them also. We need to listen to everybody. You can't just lay out one ethnicity, one culture, and you can't cancel one culture just because they're Native American, because it might hurt them or it hurts somebody else. You can't segregate. So if we want to be inclusive, we can't be thinking about ourselves. We need to think about our community. And if there are people who have had individual situations that they've been attacked or they've been hurt based on their culture, no matter what it is, black, white, purple, brown, whatever, then we need to help educate our entire community about all races, not just Native American, not just Indigenous, not just Black Lives Matter, all of them. But by canceling a logo, a moniker, is just canceling one more thing for our children that have lived in a world for the last 2 years of cancel culture. School being canceled, lives being canceled, what they know being canceled. And for the kids that relate to the Native Americans, are proud of that, you are just canceling their heritage. And that's awful, and against what a school board should be for. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask at this point.
One more, Mr. Kavakis. I'll be quick. You have one more, Mr. Kavakis.
Sorry.
So I know some of you board members have already met many of the Native Americans who actually live here. So the Raven side of things, if you guys would like this Saturday, we can meet up with several of the Native Americans who live here in Rutland. One being Peggy Sue Roselle, who's been called, not Native enough, too white to be Native, not smart enough to know any better, just because she wants to keep the Raiders. And there's dozens and dozens of Native Americans who have contacted us over the last 2 years. So you guys, you know my number, you know my number, you know my number. They'll give you my number. If you want to meet these Native Americans, we'll meet them this Saturday. And not the ones wherever that you're talking about.
Thank you. What was your name and town again, sir?
Just give your name, please.
Thanks. One more, Mr. Bliss?
Yeah.
We're done?
I think you're good.
Okay, I will call and ask my clerk to do a roll call vote, please. Yes is approving the motion of going back to Raiders, or going to Raiders, excuse me, not back, but to Raiders, as it was mentioned, and no is to stay with the Ravens. And
just to clarify, you said you'd address the 2/3?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no 2/3. I looked at Robert's rules.
So your ruling is that this, being not on the agenda, does not need a 2/3?
Yes, yes. And you can challenge the ruling, if anybody would like to, and I can go to that point. Okay, Aaron, then I'd like you to call the roll call vote for the...
Okay, everybody ready? Ann?
No.
No.
No. Allison?
No.
Whitney?
Yes.
Charlene?
Yes.
Ina?
Sorry.
No. Kevin?
No.
Tricia?
Yes.
Kathy?
No.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Me, Aaron, yes. 5-5.
And before I break this, I'd just like to make 2 comments that I would wish that the new board coming in March would hold some community meetings like the communities have done up north. One of the things that most people came to me about with this issue was not just getting rid of the Raiders, but the lack of continuity within the connection to the history that we have, such as the Rutland Royals, the baseball team, or the Falcons, which was from the junior high program. And I will vote yes to go back to the Raiders. Okay? Is there a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Second?
All second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion adjourned.